The date is April 20th, 2017. The time is 12:14, and we will have a roll call starting from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Allison Beckham.
Kim Hartman.
Pam Kirby.
Barbara Perleberg, all board members are present, and we do have a quorum. We'll move directly to item 4A, and I will make a motion that we vote to convene an executive session for discussions or consultations with designated representatives of the public body in order to consider its position and instruct its representatives regarding negotiations with employee organizations regarding the salaries, salary schedules, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits of employees of the public body so that those representatives can properly represent the board in upcoming meet and confer sessions pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.03A5. Further discussion or consultation for legal advice with the attorney for the governing board regarding the aforementioned pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.03A3. I have made that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0, and we will convene an executive session. April 20th, 2017. The time is 2:27. We will start with a roll call from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Allison Beckham.
Kim Hartman.
Pam Kirby.
Barbara Perleberg. All board members are present, and we do have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. We will move directly to our first action item, item 9A, approval of alternative project delivery method, APDM, factors for request for qualifications, RFQ number 17086, construction manager at risk services for the new and repurposed space at Cheyenne Traditional School. Dr. Bordwell, would you like to start us off?
If you have any,
Are you
yeah,
live?
push the other one. All right, if you have any questions regarding this, we have our consultant with us. So, Missy, if you want to come up to the podium. So what we're doing is going through the procurement processes, and these are the first steps that you have to do in order to then go out and procure a firm. And so if you have any questions, we have consulted with her organization. She did present to the governing board here about a month ago. I guess it was January. Has it been that long?
February.
Wow, February. So, as you know, we had a resignation in the procurement department in January, so we have been without a lead, and we have hired her company to lead us through this process because projects needed to move forward. So Missy's here to answer any questions when it comes to procurement.
Good afternoon, governing board members.
Hello.
Hello.
Is your mic?
Is it on? There you go.
Nice and close.
use mine.
All right.
So do you have any questions specifically regarding these items for the factors to go forward with the APDM? Because basically the rule says that you have to determine in writing that you're going to use an alternative project delivery method, which is what a CMAR at risk would be. So that's where all of these probably should have been done maybe back in December when you initiated and directed to move forward with some of those construction projects, but we're here now.
Okay, all right. Do we have any questions regarding this item? Board Member Kirby?
Thank you. So we have, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items that are all essentially the same, just for
Correct.
different facilities.
Different projects, correct.
So, Ms. Marshall, if I can't ask this question, let me know. But my question is, there's one facility that is missing from this list. No, is it not? Wait. Ho. Yes.
I know what I know
Yeah.
the one you're
So
asking for.
so there's one facility missing. It's Pima,
Right.
which was the last one we did, and maybe that's why it's not on the list yet. It hasn't queued up.
I believe that that's probably the
Okay.
case, yes.
But that would come forward at some point.
Correct,
Okay.
absolutely, yes. We're actually targeting the May 4th board meeting for 2 subsequent APDM factor determinations to be approved, one for Pima and one for the central kitchen project.
Okay.
And that would be the initial part to start the actual process to release the RFQs,
You said Pima and,
the central kitchen project.
We haven't had a conversation about the central kitchen, but we have a project we're going to bring in and discuss with the governing board of how to actually save the district money and how we design the rebuilds out of a central kitchen, which then also increases our ability to bring in money for food services. So that'll be forthcoming. It hasn't been discussed, and it'll be discussed in May.
okay, before we approve.
Or you do that.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
So this
Board,
is,
Board Member Beckham?
excuse me, so this is just to put out the requests, that's all it's for. Then they will get the requests from 3 or 4 entities, then it comes back and it gets evaluated. Is that correct?
Well, because you were already a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of when the board initially said to go ahead and move forward with construction projects to the time that we were engaged for some of those, only one request for qualifications had been released by the district's purchasing department, and we were called in to kind of review that to see if it was okay, and it was missing some key elements that are required for those types of solicitations, and one of them being the initial approval to go forward with that type of procurement. So I have a little presentation and a synopsis that I think that you may have seen in terms of how we got here from December to now, which I'd be more than happy to show if a visual as opposed to share with you a narrative that kind of talks about December is when you originally said move forward with construction projects. Then there was a period of time that was before Missy, meaning I don't know what happened there, but RFQ was released for Hopi Elementary's rebuild project in March. We were engaged halfway through once that was out on the street. We identified some key things that needed to be cleaned up. We did that through an amendment. We actually held a pre-submittal meeting on site for contractors to come and actually look. And then we had the evaluation, and that's actually a subsequent agenda item here today.
Okay. So what this will produce is the ability for any contractor that's qualified to submit a bid. Then the district goes through its evaluation process, just like it has for Hopi, and then it'll come back to us with their recommendation of a contractor.
Correct. Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Board Member Hartman?
Just a clarifying question. So we're going through this APDM because we are using a CMAR that is not a standard protocol.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Correct.
And we are saying the CMAR is a recommended. So my question for you, and I, just so you make sure I'm understanding the purpose of a CMAR, can you walk through what the intended benefit is of hiring this additional resource?
If you didn't go through the alternative project delivery method, then your standard method for obtaining a product or service would be a bid or an RFP, which means you would have to have all of your drawings, all of your design, everything done on the architectural side before you could even put out a solicitation for a contractor to submit on. And then at that point, it would be the base bid, the price of the bid itself, and nothing further. Whereas with an alternative project delivery method, it engages, the architectural firm has already been selected, and it engages the contractor prior to all of those documents being finalized. So they're working in tandem together to get to that final GMP, which is the actual cost for the project. And there are different, depending upon the project, there may be one or multiple guaranteed maximum prices for the different phases in that construction.
Okay.
Does that help a little bit?
It does. So my follow-up question is, in the CMAR, they added value engineering. So
Absolutely.
they're actually finding opportunities of cost savings. So ideally, they pay for themselves. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Excuse me, Ms.
Yes.
Board Member Hartman. Yes, Board Member Hartman. It does. It's a dual. It works for both sides. It saves them time and money and saves us time and money. Whereas they can actually see some things that may or may not have been designed, that we're at that stage that we can make that change as we build it. So.
And if it was just a straight bid process where all of the documentation and all of the specs and all of the drafts have been provided by the architectural firm, and then you did do just a formal invitation for bid where it was based on price alone, any change would result in a change order. So that initial base price very well could not be the end result of the price of the project because you didn't have that combination of the architect and the contractor working together. And a lot of times when you have short time frames, it just precludes itself from going through a standard bid.
Thank you.
Is that helpful? Okay.
Okay. All right, Board Member Beckham.
This brings up one question that you said, and I want to get it clarified. So when the CMNR is, I realize that this is just going out to get those bids, but once we approve one of those, it is a negotiated bid process, and how much negotiating power do we have once we've already picked that person on the actual end product?
Okay, so great question, Board Member Beckham. When you start the negotiation for an award, the evaluation is conducted by the members that have been comprised. They have the ranking 1, 2, 3, however many offers have been received. Then the district and I have entered into negotiation discussions with the highest ranked firm. If we're not able to get to a mutual agreed upon numbers and fees, then the statute requires that we go to the next highest ranked firm. If we don't get to any agreement through that process, then we come back and we either cancel, restart, however whatever the board decides at that point. But it's usually in the best interest of the highest-ranked firm to be acquiesce to a lot of the conditions that the district, and I've worked with district personnel to determine what those ceilings are for the different percentages and the different fees.
Okay, and you act as our consultant in that matter then?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I know I asked that question last time, but I just wanted to make sure I understood
Yes,
it. Thank you.
absolutely. And again, I'm acting in your best interest, so I obviously have had discussions with Mr. Hartwell, Dr. Birdwell, and in your legal staff.
Thank you.
Let me just make a comment. Board Member Beckman. If for some reason something happens and we can't negotiate with the preferred, the one that's selected, and we have to go to the second, there's no going back to the first. So then we start the process all over again. The first one can't say, oh, I'm just kidding, I can change that number. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So we have to go to the second and then to the third. There's a lot of variables that goes into that selection process on the first one. One we just went through that I can't discuss today is not quite as challenging as Hopi, but it's very challenging with the time frames that we have. So in looking at the variables on some of these general contractors, they could have good qualifications to rebuild a kitchen, or they could have it to rebuild some of the campus. But when these specific areas come in, they have to have specific qualifications that they've done and they can prove to help mitigate our risk. And that's important.
There are also governing board published documents that help guide percentages for us. Before we hired architects, I went through and read all of the school facilities board recommendations based on the sizes of projects, and so that we stay within the recommended statewide school construction percentages. So there are guidelines that we use in this, so it's not what we don't just pick a number out of the hat. We have actually some good guidelines that actually help us with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Are we ready to make a motion on item 9A? Board Member Hartman.
I guess I'll be the brave person to approve the alternative project delivery method factors for requests for qualifications for RFQ 17086 for a construction manager at-risk services for the new and repurposed spaces of, can I just speak to A through F all at once? Or, I'm sorry, A through E.
A through E. I'm not Michelle, do we need to do those individually? I'm assuming those items, we have to have individual votes? Yeah. So we are just referring to 9A.
Okay. Cheyenne Traditional School.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We'll then move very quickly on to 9B, the approval of alternative project delivery method, APDM factors for requests for qualifications, RFQ number 17085, construction manager at risk services for the rebuild of Hohokam Elementary School. I will make that a motion if we're all comfortable. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We will move to 9C, approval of alternative project delivery method, APDM, factors for requests for qualifications, RFQ number 17084, construction manager at risk, services for the track and field improvements at Chaparral, Coronado, and Saguaro High Schools. If there's no questions, I will make that motion.
Second.
Second, thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to 9D, approval of alternative project delivery method, APDM factors for requests for qualifications, RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for the rebuild at Hopi Elementary School. If there are no questions, I will make that motion.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Moving to 9E, approval of award of requests for qualifications, RFQ number 17081, for the rebuild of Hopi Elementary School. We will kind of pause here. There might be questions. It is different than the others, so if we have any questions. Board Member Hartman's light flashing. Is that new or old? Okay, that's okay. I'll cancel that. Do we have any questions on action item 9E? try pushing your light, just so I know if it works, the request light. Okay, I gotcha. Board Member Beckham. What's that? Yes, that's fine.
So this is the one that has gone through the actual process. You've done the evaluation.
That's correct.
You came up with a fee schedule. Is that not on here to be talked about?
Did the draft contract make it to?
This is different well, from my board books.
Put it on there.
I'm sorry?
You didn't get the draft contract?
A fee schedule
Well, there was a fee
included
schedule
in.
in the board books, correct? No?
I don't,
Not the contract, there was a narrative.
the fee schedule. Was there a fee schedule on board books?
I've got it.
There was,
I have,
I think there was a comparison of 3.
there was the comparison of the 3, and then there
Correct.
was, I have it, just a minute, I believe.
The packet should have included the RFQ scoring of the 3 firms that submitted.
we did see
The
that.
draft contract, and then an executive summary that kind of mirrors the background with some pieces of information outside, additional information outside of
There
it.
was an executive summary, that's, yes.
Yes.
Okay, and so I can ask questions about this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I just need clarification, and it is, when it talks about the fee schedule, it says the CM&R fee not to exceed 100,000. I'd like to know what that is for. I'm assuming it is for the design, that it's going to sit down with the architect and do, and so that should be something that's a couple of months?
Correct.
Is that what that fee is for?
Correct. And then if you have the draft contract, all the fees are outlined in Article 4, which is page 14.
Board member, you do not have a copy of the
No,
contract?
we did not get the copy of that. Did you get it?
We didn't get the contract.
Because I got the narrative, that's why I'm asking what these are for.
I have it. I emailed it.
Okay.
We can get a hard copy made for you. We happen to have a copy with us this evening.
Oh, you're not able to pull that up online?
It's not on the.
Huh.
Huh.
And I'm sorry.
Board books isn't letting them access.
I always
can ask.
save it.
So I
as a-
sent these
as
questions
thing,
in.
just for that reason, because I
So
don't
that,
trust
so
our
my next
online.
question, and I'll just go, it says, oh, I'll wait.
So she's
me to
going
ask
to
my
go to
next
her next question while they pull that up for her.
Okay. Is, it says the district negotiated the general conditions at not to exceed 7%, but it doesn't say 7% of what? So what is it 7% of?
The original budget that I was given for this contract prior to the release was, I believe,
Is the contract on there?
21 million. And I've been told from the architectural firm that that does not include adjacent ways funding.
And Board Member Beckham, that negotiating started out at 10%, and we negotiated that down to 7.
Okay, so it's going to be 7% of the original budget of 21 million. Is the 21 million the actual bid for the facilities, the fields, all the construction? Or would that include the 100,000 fee that is part of the design process?
The fees, Governor, or I'm sorry, Board Member Beckham, the fees that you speak of for the fields and all of those other ancillary is going to be included in the guaranteed maximum price. This procurement has 2 guaranteed maximum prices to come up to that end budget number. The first, you need to have a guaranteed maximum price agreed upon prior to any shovels getting in the ground, prior to any actual construction activities occurring. So that's why for a project of this magnitude, we recommend at least 2, because you can get a lot of the site work, a lot of the staging, utilities, and things like that done initially with the first GMP, while you focus on the second GMP for all of your additional construction costs.
And so what are those?
So that is to be determined. We've not yet gotten to the point. This is the first element in approving this type of procurement. We would need to agree on the design, then we would negotiate the GMP, the first GMP, and the construction services contract.
And
then
that would
after
come
that, we
back
would-
to you.
Absolutely. Every part of the way, we would come back to you for
This is
that.
just the first phase.
Correct.
So let me go through, and then then I have to come back to a question on that. The next part is which is the contingency fee is 4%, but it doesn't say 4% of what?
Would you prefer that it has a hard number? We agreed upon
No, I'm
this.
just asking because it's not a complete. It could be
4% of the 21 million?
of some-
Correct. The
something.
21 million is the number that we used for this
Okay,
negotiation
so,
specifically.
okay, and then the last is another fee, general conditions. The cost of doing business on this job is to not exceed a lump sum of $1,050,000. Is that part of the 7% general contingency, or is that on top of it?
On top of.
So it looks like that if we have a budget of 21 million, we need to add 100,000 to it and another $1,050,000, unless that 100,000 fee and the $1,050,000 fee is coming out of that 21 million. So that's where I don't understand where those funds come from.
And that's something that I think that would be at a district level with the finance department, because I don't have access to that breakdown.
It was included in the 21 million. The original cost of this project is 18.7. We put the 21 in to include these additional costs, so it's built into that price. What is not there is any adjacent ways that may be added because the adjacent ways process has changed.
Yes.
And we think it would be very limiting going forward under the SFB.
Okay. And then this would be for Dr. Birdwell, because you had mentioned that there were guidelines, and so that these are all within the guidelines,
Actually,
construction guidelines that you spoke about?
Thank you, Board Member Beckham. In actuality, as Mr. Hartwell had alluded to, you negotiate these prices, so they came in higher, we brought it down. So we actually negotiated it. It is within the guidelines, and actually a very good price given also the market right now.
Okay. The only concern I have is going back to, and I guess it's just best practices, that the general conditions typically has been 7% of what the construction cost would be, but right now, we're paying an additional 7% on the 100,000 and on the 7% on the $1,050,000. So why wouldn't it be the 7% on the 18.7 or what those guaranteed, the actual construction costs would be?
The GMP, Board Member Beckham, the GMP is based out, and it's in Exhibit D that breaks out the cost of the work for the labor, materials, equipment, and warranty, then the contingency, and then the indirect costs, which is what we agreed upon for that lump sum of $1,050,000, and the general conditions being 7%. So alluding to what Dr. Birdwell had said regarding the budget amount, I'm not sure, I don't know how that budget of 21 million was comprised, and if it did or did not include the construction costs to put together that project. Since it does, I don't believe that you will be paying the additional costs on costs that are already included in another area.
But as this reads, it says it is. So that's just my question, because you're telling me the 7% is on the 21 million, and that 21 million includes the $1,050,000 and the 100,000.
And as we go forward, we'll get that clarified. She inherited this midway through the stream, and so those dollars were set by Mr. O'Brien, and we will make sure we separate those out better going forward. Because I think that she just picked it up and ran with what the dollars had already been set
Yes.
and had been communicated, so we will separate those out in the next one.
Okay, well, then I will have to let you know that is this appropriate to say that since we could be voting on this on Tuesday, I would not want to vote on this until I had those numbers and I knew, because once I say I vote on this, this is what I'm voting on. And since I don't have those numbers, I would find it hard to vote today on that.
Well, and as I said, this includes, it is included in it. And you can vote that you don't agree with that,
Yeah.
and you don't agree with the contract, and the contract does come for vote tonight. And it's certainly your ability to vote against that and not, so.
Okay, and since I haven't seen the contract, then that's what I would do. All right, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions? Board Member Hartman?
I had a broader question. I actually was under the understanding that we were going to have a broader conversation around the overall process, the timing of each of these steps, this being one of them. Did I misunderstand that as being a work study agenda item for today?
It's an action item.
I thought there was a discussion item. When are we having that discussion?
Clarify what you want to discuss.
The overall process, so there's the architect, there's the construction, there's the community involvement, there's just the overall process of, and I thought we were going to visit that as well as, basically the work plan that goes behind all of that.
We can,
Excellent question, Board Member Hartman. What we've been doing is catch up. We're approximately 2 months behind. In the last 2 weeks, to bring this up to where that we can actually go out for proposals, go to the CMAR program to get us on schedule, so that we could go ahead and get some of these proposals out to the field and then start the process for selection. The process then for putting the project program management pieces of that together, which I know you're interested in too, as well as the rest of the board. There is a project program management whole plan that goes at all different levels. One is an ad hoc viewing for yourselves. I've worked with Laura in finance. There's project codes that's set up for each project, sub-account codes that's set up for that so we can manage the accounting piece of it. There is a whole presentation that I can do for you on that whole project plan and how it works for a project of this magnitude. And I'm happy to do that and look forward to doing that. But I don't know if you want us to do it.
you can't do it on this, it's not on the agenda. However, we'll be happy to add it to Tuesday's board meeting to give you that full scope. I know that they've been working extremely hard over the last 2 weeks to get us caught up because we were a good 2 months behind on project. And this is to move us forward so that we can actually get back on track with hoping. But Tuesday night, we will go through that whole plan with you. We finally have been able to set up the financial codes. We've been able to get the project and project management and get it delineated to a discussion that I think will make a lot of sense to you.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Kirby.
Okay, so it's the actual construction company is in our board book, but I don't see it on a public document. And is there a reason why that's not being discussed today? Is there a legal reason why it's not being discussed today?
I've lost legal counsel to go make copies of the contract for you. So, from an RFQ process, maybe Missy can answer that from an RFQ, that when we make it public.
That was my recommendation because it was being submitted to you prior to this meeting today. In the event that you did not approve it, then we would have to go to the second ranked firm, and that may impact our ability to negotiate.
Okay.
So it is public record. We could talk about the 3 offers. You got the scoring of those 3.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because I was wondering if it didn't get approved today, how does that affect what you have to do, and is that the reason why we're not?
It was a
naming?
safeguard.
Okay.
Yes, it was a safeguard on my
And I'm
behalf.
all about safeguards. That's
You can deduce, anyone could deduce by looking at the scoring who was 1, 2, and 3, but until there's an actual governing board approval of the contract, I didn't want to disclose who that firm was officially.
So, Dr. Birdwell, have you worked with the firm before?
Board Member Curry, Governing Board, I have in multiple capacities. The Bridges School that many of you went to visit was one of their constructions. Also, let me just note that I walked the entire Ingleside campus because this was the construction firm, and every concern that the principal brought forward was not on behalf of the construction firm. For instance, there was a rumor out there that the windows had been put in reverse, and that was not the case at all. These were the windows that the board selected, not the board, excuse me, that the district selected at the time, and they're just a different style of window that the district had been used to. The design itself is the piece that most of the complaints came from. The windows were too high in the rooms, we didn't like, it looked like a prison rather than a school. Those are design, those are architectural issues. There was a material flaw in the gymnasium roofing that the roofing company came back and made right by and had to repair, and they had to then put a new flooring in. So there was nothing that the construction firm had done that would have caused those issues. There were design issues that one would not call the best design for schools. It is also my understanding that $3 to $4 million were removed from that project because it was the last project of a bond, and dollars were not placed in the school at the level that some of the other schools had received, including the use of old furniture that had made the parents uncomfortable. So none of those issues at Ingleside should be really put onto this construction firm's background. By you seeing the Bridges Elementary School, you got to see quality schools that they do build. I've also built 2 middle schools with them, Sossaman and Cooley Middle School, top of the line, top rate schools, built in an 8-month process, unbelievable. 2 schools completely built in 8 months, which was an amazing feat, and only done because this is a large enough firm who could handle the time frame necessary to make sure it was open for schools. So huge advantage. The other advantage that I really like about this construction firm is that they are also a strong communicator with the community. In other words, they will go door to door and put hangers on the doors when they're going to disrupt the community because of construction, to let them know we're going to be doing something at 3 a.m. and you might hear some machines, and we do apologize, it will be short-lived, but they go door to door and make sure the community is well aware of what's happening, if they're going to have delays in traffic and other such things. So they're a very strong communication, and they're a large national firm that can handle a project of this size and this space. So I support them 100%.
Thank you.
Dr. Birdwell, if I could just make a comment, Board President, Ms. Perlberg, and the Board. This is not an easy site. This is probably one of the most complex sites we have to build on. I'm sorry. This is the ultimate just-in-time building. So we can't bring in a lot of steel. We can't store a lot of things on the site. Not only do we have to project manage the deliverables to try to get it built in different stages, but we have to plan on different types of material coming in on like every 2 days to be able to do this. At the same time, we're building a full section at a time that we're trying to do this while school is operating. At the same time, this is the only builder that preliminarily went to a local church, made arrangements with them to use their parking spots, to bus all of their subcontractors to the site every day, instead of them trying to find places to park and disrupt the community. None of the other builders did this. The idea of the protection and the surrounding and the community, when you took a look at the proposal from this particular contractor, it was far above the rest of them in terms of community involvement, safety and security, on time and in budget, and the way they actually scoped the project. So a lot of things had more pluses on it with this one, which is why they had the highest number in the selection. However, there were things that I looked at, if I was building it and having been a general contractor at one time in my life, what were the things that I would look at that I would want in this? And they looked at them. I mean, we've got to have our own utilities brought into this. We can't bridge off the utilities from the existing school. That's all going to be new. And like Dr. Birdwell said, if for some reason the city doesn't let us use the existing lanes of traffic we got, and we're going to have to widen the road, well, if we can't get adjacent ways, then we've got to pay for that. And so they're trying to work that with the city to make it happen. The last thing is, Phoenix is probably one of the most difficult to work plans through. I don't know if you've ever been there before. It's worse than fries on a Friday night trying to get meat at the meat counter. So you go up the escalator, and it literally is taking a number, and you submit your plans there. And I'm not sure, unless you have governor influence, that you can expedite things through there. So that process will start straight away, just on the outline planning, if you will. So it is very complex. There is a short window to get it done. We are having community interest that we're having consideration on with this. And, you know, the only other project that we have that's almost as complicated but doesn't involve the children as much are 3 football fields in 120-degree weather. And we've come to terms with that today.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we're just going to stay on Hopi right now.
Right?
Excuse me, if I could just reiterate to what, speaking to what Mr. Hartwell said, based on what he just explained, that's where there's a committee comprised of 6 different individuals individually reviewing these submittals, and that was what stood out specifically for the highest ranking firm, was their method of approach specifically with the community in this area.
Right, right. Okay, Board Member Beckham, you have your light on.
Yes, okay, thank you. You mentioned something. You said if we vote no tonight on this particular action item, that means you go to the second bidder. Okay,
It depends on what you don't approve. If you just don't
Okay.
approve the language of the contract, then that would just prolong the ability to negotiate to get what it is exactly that you would like to see. If you do not approve the selection of this contractor, then that's where we would have to go to the next highest ranking and start the whole process to negotiate the design contract again.
okay. So then I want to be clear, because I was not clear on that point, that I'm not opposed to this construction company. It's just that I'm not able to make a decision because I don't have the information before this vote. I was just handed the contract, and when I look at the questions I just asked you, I'm still questioning why we should be paying 7% on those 2 other fees. So is it possible to is it possible to postpone it till Tuesday
How
so
about
the
we first
board could
get
that?
some clarity about what we're approving tonight? Because my understanding is the action item is the approval of this construction company, not per se the contract itself, as they're, I'm assuming, still moving parts. Is that accurate, or do we need to clarify that?
President Perlberg, it is awarding of this contract is awarding of the contractor. So we wouldn't be able to award to the contractor until we have a negotiated contract for the design piece. If we don't have that, then we have to go to number 2.
So there is a next step of approving the contract after we approve this contractor. Is that right?
The next step after this approval would be negotiating the guaranteed maximum price for the first phase, coming back to you, getting approval for that dollar amount, executing that, and also the construction services contract. And then that, I think of these as being an Oreo. You've got the design, you've got the GMP,
Right.
and then you've got the construction services, and that way makes one total project contract from a procurement standpoint.
Okay, all right.
So we're going to be back to you 2 more times.
Okay, got that.
At least, because this one has 2 GMPs, so
least.
actually 3 for Hopi.
Board Member Kirby.
Okay, well, I'm more confused now than I was when I hit my button. But so we are approving this contract tonight. We are asking us to
You're
approve.
asked to, yes.
So my question, I guess, is there language that we could add tonight from the dais? Or is it too complicated? Because that's always dangerous to add language from the dais. But is there language that we could add from the dais that's this $21 million number to give Board Member Beckham more confidence, or would that even get you there?
You're asking me to approve a contract I literally received 3 minutes ago, so I haven't even looked at it. So it's not that I'm opposing it in any way, it's just that I didn't get the information to even understand what I'm
Do you want to
approving.
review the process that this contract went through already with staff,
So,
as far as how it was vetted out and built?
so Governing Board, just to let you know,
Timeline.
in order to put a shovel in the ground in June, we broke this project into multiple contracts. Normally, we'd bring you 1 contract, we're bringing you multiple contracts. This is so that we can actually begin to move dirt, that we can actually begin to get electricity to the site, et cetera. It's not the construction of the actual building coming up out of the ground. That said, and maybe I'm misunderstanding too, but Michelle has reviewed the entire contract on behalf of the governing board as legal counsel. Missy has represented us from a procurement standpoint, falling within the guidelines of construction to make sure that we were protected. And certainly, The percentages that we are paying out is something that I sat in a meeting and went through with them, and Mr. Hartwell certainly negotiated those percentages as well. So on your behalf, the four of us did work on this. In the same hand, I'm going to say to you, if it's horribly uncomfortable because you're just now seeing the contract, you can wait and approve it Tuesday night. You can just simply wait and read it, and if you have any questions, that's fine with us. I mean, we're not going to not put a shovel in the ground in June if we wait till Tuesday. So if you'd like to have it over the weekend and read it, that's just fine with us. Do know that Michelle has gone through this contract on your behalf, though I want you to know that.
And to answer the question about changing terms, if you were to change terms, we'd need to talk to firm number one and make sure that they were in agreement. We can't just change the terms and assume, if it's anything material. So you can make changes, of course.
Well, Board Member Hartman had her light on. Do you want to?
I appreciate that there's expertise in the room, legal, construction, and experience that will actually help validate. We're looking to you to validate this contract. My question is 9E stated correctly? Actually, is an agenda item. It says approval for the award of RFQ as opposed to award of the contract. It sounds like it's, is that stated?
Do you want to
Well, that
clarify
is.
that RFQ?
Yeah, so in the RFQ, what you're doing is awarding the contractor. You award them through the signature of a contract. It's all intertwined.
Okay.
Missy, did I say it right?
You did, Dr. Birdwell, and that's, when I put initially with Sandra to award of the design phase contract, I realized that that's procurement language, and that doesn't necessarily translate to if we do that, that's actually awarding the contract, the RFQ, to contractor firm highest ranked number one. So it's kind of synonymous in terms of when you approve and award the design phase pre-construction contract, you are essentially approving the contractor for the project. And just as a side note and a caveat, and I do have a little presentation to kind of show from December to date and where we plan to go by the end of this fiscal year for all of your regular and study session scheduled meetings. We were called in on the 16th of March. The very next day, I put together a procurement schedule for all of these different activities that need to occur prior to me passing the baton to the architectural, design, and contractor for them to start. I always think of procurement as like your first runner in a relay race. So you need to have all of these activities handled before you actually can start mobilizing for the project to move forward in unison with your architectural firm and your contractor. That's not to say that your architectural firm isn't doing things already, but in order for them to work together, these activities have to occur for each project. Does that offer some clarity?
Yes, it's just different terminology than what I'm used to saying. Just RFQ is an RFQ, and then you have a contract, a result of it, and then that's what you're, so I understand what you're saying. The presentation that you keep referring to, it may be useful. I don't know if we need to see it now, but if it would have been in the board book, I would have looked at it in advance and not asked these questions. So it probably would be useful to have seen it or see it at some point soon.
I shared that information with a couple. I don't know how
So-
it didn't make it, but I
William,
can pull it
if
up
it will
now.
help
I
you,
mean,
we'll
I
put
have
it up
just
right now.
I have a paragraph synopsis narrative I could go over with you very quickly, and then the visual just kind of.
Well, let me ask
Speak
this
to that.
first. Well, I can't pull the board. I'm not trying to pull you, but I just need to know, if you're not comfortable with the contract and you'd like the weekend, what we could do is come back Tuesday, she could do a presentation, you've read the contract, you can make an approval at that time, or she can do a presentation right now, but it's not going to resolve the issue that you haven't read the contract. So I don't want to have her jump through that and then turn around and say, well, but we still haven't read the contract, therefore we're not comfortable. So it really, we're flexible, and I apologize. Being out of town, I'm catching up myself.
Yeah.
But I appreciate all the work the team did while I was gone.
I can say, since I asked the question, I don't need to see that now because I do recognize that it is separate from this contract, but I would like to see it. So if it can be included in our board book for Tuesday.
You
That would
bet.
be great.
Yeah, we'll put
Thanks.
that on. Well, a matter of fact, we'll tie that in with Mr. Hartwell's presentation, because they go hand in hand, and it makes a lot of sense.
Tuesday.
So come back Tuesday, Missy.
Board Member Kirby?
I'll be here every time.
Well, I was just going to state, I am comfortable with the expertise in the room, particularly in this area, is not my area of expertise. So honestly, even if I read this contract, I'm not sure what I would understand what I was reading. And additionally, I also just wanted to add that there has been some anxiety about this rebuild at Hopi, and I think that does reach back to the middle school that's in that same community, and it's connected. And so I appreciate, Dr. Birdwell, that you recognize that. You're very clear on what the perception is, and see it for what it is, and you're not trying to dodge that elephant in the room. And that you have schools that you've built recently, working with the same company, that are honestly quite beautiful. And I know that's the design and not necessarily the construction, it's not the lumber and things, but to many of our communities, how it looks is the construction. Absolutely. So, but I do recognize the difference. So if we can just continue that acknowledgement as we move through this project, I think that would help it move along.
Okay, so, did you want to make a motion to, oh, sorry, Board Member Beckham.
We're not going to maybe understand this whole contract, but we do need to go to the numbers and see how the budget. And so I just kind of went to it and looked at it, and it is different from what I was just told. So it is different from the narrative that was given. It says here that it is not just it says the last fee in the narrative is a general condition or the cost of doing business on this job as a not-to-exceed lump sum of $1.5 million, and that this would include site superintendent, foreman, bonding, life insurance, etc. The contract says, contract's fee or profit not to exceed $1,050,000 lump sum. It also then says, the next one is general, and this is 4.1.2.2, general conditions shall not exceed 7% of the cost of work. That's very different from the $21 million original budget number.
Excuse me. Board
And
member.
then,
Go ahead. Sorry.
so I'm just, so if I have the contract, I can ask those questions and then get an answer, but so if you can just clarify how, what I just heard and then what I just read, they're different.
If I could
Use
Board
mine.
Member Beckham, sorry. The reason it's stated that way is because right now we start out with a GMP of 21 million. The onus is on the contractor to come in below that. So if they come in at 19, it's 7% of 19, not 21. So that's where the difference comes in. So the maximum that we would pay would be 7% of the 21 if we were at 21, unless we had changes that we made along the way that were our fault. But the maximum we would pay is 7% of the 21. But the onus is on the subcontractor or to the contractor to come in below that. And that's why that you have that variance.
Can I speak?
Board
Can I
Member
follow?
Beckham? Yes.
So, but if you remember what I said is that I was given the information that we would be paying 7% on top of that 1.5, but that's not what the contract says. So actually, the contract does not include that contractor's fee or profit. That's very different from the narrative. So, once again, I just need time to digest the information, ask any questions that there are, and I think there needs to be clarification between the narrative and what the contract actually says to understand that. That's all. Thank you.
I can't explain it.
Okay. Board Member Kirby? That was on. We'll see if this goes through. And don't be offended if it doesn't, and I won't be offended if it doesn't, okay? So I'm just gonna put it in the water here. So I am going to make a motion that we approve the award of request for qualifications, RFQ, number 17081, for the rebuild of Hopi Elementary School. Do I have a second? All right. That motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion someone would like to make? And it can be to postpone to Tuesday.
That's my motion.
Action item till Tuesday.
I'd second.
I have,
Oh, nope,
Okay.
not second.
All
discussion
right,
first.
discussion first.
Sorry.
Board
Because-
Member Kirby?
We need to talk about when we get, so clearly, Board Member Beckham already has questions on the table. And give her a couple of hours with this, and I'm sure she's going to come up with a long list of questions. So we need to have some timelines on when our questions are due back to staff to give them time to answer those questions and get back to us so that when we come in here on Tuesday night, it goes smoothly. So I'd like to look to staff to tell us when you need those questions by, and it's legal, it's construction.
Yeah.
Hence, I'm turning to Michelle and saying, this is contract language, and I need a little help with that, but I think we're going to need to call the, probably, we need to dial call help.
Yes. I appreciate that, Board Member Kirby. I can handle questions from each of you as they come and answer them as they come. The difficulty, I think the bigger difficulty will be if I'm getting a sense that the board wants to change terms and then we need agreement from the other side. So, given that we're talking about next Tuesday, I'm just looking at a calendar.
Yeah, and that said, we'd like 24 hours before a board meeting to pull an item if we're going to have to renegotiate a contract. So today is Thursday, so.
Well, I'd also like to clarify that one board member alone would not change negotiation terms.
No, that's absolutely right. yeah.
Right.
Good
Okay,
point.
so, yeah, so that couldn't happen without another meeting or
True.
another, I mean, so.
I was just,
that would be
I'm
a much
sorry,
bigger
thank you for
problem.
that
Yeah.
clarification.
All right, you bet.
I was just indicating that if I was starting to get a sense from the questions I was getting from you collectively,
Have to go
that
back
I
to
would,
negotiate. Perfect.
anyway. Gosh,
So if we give you the weekend to read it, if you could send your questions Monday morning, that would be great. And
That works.
Michelle, we could schedule a meeting Monday morning and get parties together and answer them.
we will do that.
And I confess, I'm just not a contract language expert, and I'm going to rely on Michelle and her to dial a friend call if she needs to.
All right. Any further discussion? Board Member Kravitz, would you like to make a crack at that motion?
I motion that we bring this information item, or
Action item.
Excuse me, action item back for vote on Tuesday evening.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Beckham seconds. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we will move on to action item 9F, approval of employee health insurance vendor. And Dr. Birdwell, would you like to present?
Yes. Governing Board, you know that last month we suspended our current contract in order to give an opportunity to take a look at our costs and give the committee an opportunity to consider other options. So you have a committee that met 15 people approximately. We only had 2 companies that came in and presented to the group, and those 2, trying to look here real quick, the committee itself, the members are made up of the classified, the teachers, and administrative associations, along with Assistant Superintendent Pam Sitton and our benefits individuals, along with being facilitated by Laura Smith. They met, they heard the presentations, and came to a consensus where they are asking the governing board to switch groups at this time, we do have that group with us. Kairos, gotta get that name down. Kairos is here with us, and we'd like them to actually do a quick introduction of themselves to you, the company that will oversee the trust, the self-insured. So if you guys would like to come up to the mic, I would welcome you introducing yourselves as a company to the governing board, and then if they have some questions in regards to the recommendation, field some of those questions for us, if you don't mind. I was not in the insurance meeting. This truly was a committee. As we had said in the board meeting, we would send this back to the insurance committee and respect that process.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. Madam Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Ashton. I'm one of the principals of Ashton Tiffany, and we're the administrative firm for Kairos Health Arizona. Kairos Health Arizona is a not-for-profit pool similar to the pool that you're in now, made up of public entities in the state of Arizona, enabled by statute. Over here we have representatives from Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is our partner on this, and then I have my business partner at the end, Mike Tiffany, as well as the real workhorses of the group, Jennifer and Tanya there. Kairos, it was established. It's being established right now by the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust, which you're familiar with, I think, because the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust provides property and liability insurance to 250 of the 254 school districts in the state of Arizona. And at a strategic planning session that the Arizona School Trust had a year and a half ago, they asked us to go out and try to find a solution, much like what happened with the Workers' Compensation Program, the Arizona School Alliance for Workers' Compensation, which provides workers' compensation insurance to school districts in the state. They asked us to do the same thing for health insurance because they felt there was not a good enough solution for all school districts across the state. And we've done that, and we worked over the last year and a half to put together what we think is a very great program for school districts. We were able to put together a quote for Scottsdale Unified School District to provide basically all of the same benefits that you're getting right now through the Valley Schools Employee Benefit Trust. And so we presented that to the committee, answered their questions, and we believe that we have a great program for you, and we can have it ready to go for your open enrollment starting May 8th, and have it ready to go for all your employees on July 1st, and provide that. A couple of the key factors that we offer through Kairos, the first and foremost is we believe a proper governance structure. That proper governance structure is that our governing board consists entirely of members of the pool. In order to be on the governing board, which directs us what to do and can fire us in 30 days notice, they have to be a business manager, superintendent, financial director of a member of the pool. The other thing we have is we have a transparency, full transparency. We will tell you exactly what you're paying for exactly every single dollar that you're paying for your health insurance. And there's a lot in there. Health insurance is very complicated. So our transparency promise is that we will give to you your financial statements that will say, here's what you spent for health insurance. And just a reminder for you, if you don't know, you're self-insured for your health insurance. So you're responsible for your own claims up to $300,000 per claim. We're going to give you that breakout of your health insurance, plus a breakout of all the administrative fees, including our fees. Line by item, we will get that to you. And then the third thing is we think that Kairos is a solution for all school districts in the state. Whether you're a large urban school district like Scottsdale School District and self-insured and able to handle that on your own, sitting side by side with smaller school districts that want to be pooled and pool their insurance together. You're not sharing in that risk. They're not sharing in your risk. You're self-insured sitting right next to them. But it is a solution for all school districts in the state. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have.
Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
I was able to kind of educate myself on the whole process. I have to say, you have a very fun website. Kind of reminds me of Southwest Airlines. So it must be a fun office to work in. So you said that you were asked to start this fund to provide something different. So my understanding is the other trusts that are out there are also member-based, correct?
They are.
And they also have one healthcare provider, different from Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, and they provide, transparency. They provide what investments, how much they make, and how much we spend on claims every year. So how do you differ from them?
Two areas. First, we are a solution for all. The trust right now, if you look at the two primary trusts, Valley Schools Employee Benefit Trust is primarily intended for large self-insureds and doesn't have a pooled program for the health insurance for all across rural Arizona. And two, we provide, our transparency is we provide every detail of every dollar you guys spend for your health insurance. And we tell you exactly what fee we're getting, and that we commit to you in writing that we're not getting any compensation from any other source other than what's directed by that governing board of Kairos. So our transparency is very, very transparent. I know that sounds redundant. The other thing is that governance structure. That governance structure is different than some out there in that we don't have anybody from Ashton Tiffany sitting on our governing board. Our governing board consists of representatives, like we might have somebody from Scottsdale School District as a board member. We'll have somebody from Chandler School District as a board member. We'll have somebody from a rural school district that's a board member. And they'll decide who our vendors are going to be. They'll hold our feet to the fire. They'll tell us to disclose everything that we have, and we answer to them. And they can get rid of us. They can get rid of anybody. They can get rid of Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean, obviously, there's contract terms that'll be there, but they can do that, and they'll be the governing body of that.
But that's not different from Valley.
It is.
The same. My understanding is their membership also, and that they have, their board members are also from the membership of the school districts.
Valley Schools Management Group has 7 board members, I believe. Those 7 board members consist of 3 members from Peoria, Paradise Valley, and Deer Valley, and then 4 members from the management group.
Oh, okay. And so yours is solely that. So even though you and Mr. Tiffany started the company, you saying that even though you're on the Articles of Incorporation, they can just say, you're gone?
In 30 days.
In 30 days, okay. Well, that's interesting, okay. And when you speak of the transparency, are you speaking of the transparency of the administration fee that we pay per employee?
Everything. We're talking about the fact, oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is happening with you now, but we have seen, because we've been running health insurance pools, we have seen that there are costs buried in your claims costs, which come into you as showing as claims expenses that your employees incurred, that are in fact not being paid to a provider. They might be being paid to a WRAP network, or you might be getting rebates from a pharmacy benefit manager, and you're only getting a portion of the rebates, and not the full rebates. Our commitment to you is everything is open kimono. We're going to show you everything in the books. You can come to our public meetings. You can look and see what our expenses are, how they're made up, and you can sit in there and see that. In addition to us providing to Scottsdale Unified School District full transparency in their reporting.
Okay. Can I ask one more question? So one of, I understand the fee structure, I understand the Blue Cross Blue Shield, the premiums, nothing is changing as far as the health benefits compared to what we had last year. I understand the premiums are changing a little bit, and in several areas they're actually a little bit lower. The administration fee is actually a little bit lower. The area that I'm not understanding is we actually put a sum of money with you, and we earn interest, and we earn capital gains, I guess, on the investment. Do we pay a fee for you to manage that in addition to the administration fee? And then how do you report to us what those earnings are? And especially since you don't have a history, because you're brand new, can you let us know what, you said you've managed 6 other self-insured pools. How are your returns on those pools?
So it's a little bit of a hybrid here, because Kairos has those self-insured sitting next to the pooled program. So the small and rural school districts who pool together, they're all collectively pooling that program, and that program will either have a surplus at the end of the year or perhaps a deficit at the end of the year. Those members are responsible for that. If they have a surplus, that surplus is now considered Kairos' surplus, and that can be invested in a different manner than what can be invested for a self-insured. As Kairos, we cannot take your money and take that and bypass Title 35, which says in order to invest public entity money, you have to invest according to Title 35. We can't take that and circumvent those rules. And so what we will do is we will take any kind of deposit premium that you have, we'll invest those, that interest will accrue 100% to you. We will, the governing board of Kairos will engage an investment manager. That investment manager will have fees, so you need to understand that they'll have that. That'll be an independent investment manager from us.
It's not your risk management company?
No.
Okay, that's what was in the narrative,
No.
is that it was your investment. Okay.
No, that'll be a different investment management firm. They'll charge a fee to do the investments. The governing board of Kairos, which is made up of school district people, will determine what is a fair fee for those, and they'll pay those. Those will come out of those investment managements. Every other dollar that's in that will accrue to Scottsdale Unified School Districts for your fund. Sitting right next to is Chandler Unified School District. They'll have their fund.
Right, because we're large enough, we don't have to be pooled, is what
Correct.
you're telling me.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't realize that because it's always referred to as pooled, so I assumed we were part of a larger pool.
No.
Okay.
I think also what's important to say is while the Kairos governing board still has to review the membership agreement, that has gone through, or still has to approve it, that has gone through Kairos governing board legal analysis, it's gone through employee benefit legal analysis, and it is now with Chandler Unified School District's council to advise on what that agreement is. If it goes as is, and this is something that's very different, if you decide to leave our program, you're going to get every dollar of your investment fund back within 60 days, if you choose, with the exception of your run-out costs associated with the claims. If you leave, it's going to take some while for those claims to be run out.
Sure.
So we're going to keep a portion of that held back, and within 60 days, we're going to give you back the rest of your money, because that's your money to do what you want to do with. That's important, I think. In addition, when you leave, for two things, if you leave, we're going to give you every piece of information you need to go and find somebody else. Shame on us if we can't keep you in our program, and we're going to make it easy for you to go out and bid your insurance and try to find an alternative program. What that means and what is not common in Arizona is we're going to give you all your loss information, we're going to give you your large loss information, we're going to give you your census information for the last 2 years, we're going to give you everything you need to make that, everything we would ask for in order to underwrite you, we're going to give that to you in a nice little package so you can go out to bid. That's different. And lastly, on the moment you do leave, you don't pay any additional charges. You've paid us for those. If you start July 1, we're going to be charging you claims administration, a per employee per month claims administration. We're going to be charging you our fee, all of that. We know, Blue Cross Blue Shield is here, we know in that first month, there's not going to be a whole lot of claims, right? Because it takes a while for those claims. You go see a doctor, it takes a while for that to be submitted. But they're getting paid in per employee per month. So when you leave and you have that run out, you shouldn't have to pay anymore. That you've paid that in those beginning months. So you shouldn't have to pay anymore. When you leave our program, you're done. You can leave and you can walk away. You get your money back. We do have to hold back for the claims run out,
Right.
but we're going to give you everything else back.
Thank you. I actually had some questions for Ms. Smith. So there's been some discussion about the transparency and what Kairos, did I say that right? Kairos would provide to us things like detail for every dollar we spend, rebates, the fees on the investment, what our returns. Are we getting that level of detail from our current provider on a regular basis?
No.
Have
When
we?
they have asked, I know that they have asked for some and they have not received it. I have the annual statements, and then we do get monthly reports on our lost claim and on our large claims, but the individual fees, I don't have backup for.
They is the benefits department.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we just received, once again, at 10 o'clock, so I haven't had the chance to look at all this information. So I appreciate, Mr. Ashton, your information around Kairos. I guess my question is, Ms. Smith or Dr. Sin, who is the leadership or cabinet team member that's part of the process? Okay, so that's what I'm interested in, is really, once again, we're relying on the committee to have gone through a decision-making process. So can you remind us once again, who's on this committee, what was the decision-making criteria? And at the end of the day, you shared that there were only 2 actually responses, so just how do they net out against each other?
So, Madam President, members of the board, we had on there SSPA, which is our classified association. They choose 2 members. SEA chooses 3 members, so we have 3 teachers on there, and SAA chooses 2 members. So at the beginning of the year, they'll start meeting in November of this year. They started meeting. That's where we get our group from. Also on there is someone from benefits, someone from payroll, and then myself is on there also, and then Mr. O'Brien, and then Laura now has been facilitating our last meeting. So that's how we get the membership and who's in the room. They take a look throughout the year at different things. They take a look at changes, what possible changes might be, what increases might be. But when we came down to the point of taking to re-looking at it, Laura Smith brought in with the vendors and the presentations and facilitated the conversation. They went through presentations with question and answer period for each of the 2 presentations that we had. And then the group had dialogue. What were the strengths? What did you like? And came to actually consensus of wanting to move to the new vendor as a group.
Okay, so I am in the deep end of the pool on this one here, but here's a couple questions that I have. So I'm going to guess, based on the individuals involved in the committee, there was a significant focus on premiums, so I'm assuming that we're pretty satisfied with premiums. Because we're self-insured, I know that that's an important, and once again, I will be the first to say I know much less than what I do know, actually. But because we are self-insured, this is an important component to this policy. So I'd actually like Ms. Smith just to kind of walk through what does that risk profile look like, and what did we learn in the process on our self-insurance side of this, as well as whatever I'm not asking that I should be asking from a fiscal fiduciary responsibility standpoint, please just add.
Board Member Hartman. The committee has reviewed and seen the monthly reports. This year we are exceptionally healthy. Every vendor that we spoke to was interested in presenting to Scottsdale, and each vendor is interested in retaining the business of Scottsdale. I think that the coverages were the difference that it came down to, and the prescription policy as well. So with the money that we have in the pool and the claims that we have paid and the fact that we prepay, we have a healthy account. We do have a self-insurance risk that we set at $300,000 that kicks in for those single claims. So we are financially strong. We can't afford to take a risk of a self-insurance pool.
So then the much broader side of my question, which is, and what are the other fiscal, financial questions that I should be asking that are not, that came to your mind when you were making the assessment? What should we know about?
We looked at the fees, at the administration fees and the breakdown of those fees, and they were lower with this vendor here, probably 3%. So I think that is substantial. I didn't have any concerns that either pool could not take care of us, but I think that I was a little concerned on the return of investment, but that's a current issue, and over the long run, I think that works out. I am comfortable with the trust investing our money. We have a long history with them on the P&C side, property and casualty, and the workman's comp. So that history speaks well, and they have a long-term history.
Okay, and then one last question then. What is the size of Kairos asset pool that you're, and it's probably not the right term, but asset portfolio probably that we're managing? What do we represent within it, and how large is it?
So Kairos is starting July 1st. So right now, and it's going to be different because we have a pooled program and you guys are standalone. So whatever funds you put into that program, that'll be your asset. Chandler will put in their funds and that'll be their assets. The financial backing of Kairos is coming from two sources. We have a pool that we were administering before that has voted to merge into that and is bringing some assets with it, as well as the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust, maybe, and I don't want to say is putting in capital, but they have already agreed to help with the startup costs, and they may be putting in additional capital. It's a little misleading to be concerned about that because you're self-insured. I can tell you this right now. If you pay $14 million a year in health in premiums right now, you might have $17 million in claims next year. And you might have 12 million, you might have 11. You're self-insured, so that will fluctuate on your experience, but you're large enough to be able to withstand that. So your asset, the money that you that you will transfer into this program, will grow with you or shrink with you depending on your claims experience and the investment return. The one thing you know for sure is that's your money, and it'll always be your money.
So then, can you tell me what are the total assets under management of Kairos then?
So the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust has $200 million in assets, $92 million in net assets or surplus. The Arizona School Alliance, I'm going to look to Mike, but I think the Arizona School Alliance has about 70 million in total assets and $30 million in net assets. Those are two organizations that are very, very financially healthy. And when we talk about net assets, that does not include any prepaid accounts that a school district might have with that. Those are assets that are owned by the pool, which is owned by the members. And that's the net assets. Those are two very, very strong, healthy financial organizations. The Arizona School Trust is the healthiest, and that's the one that's doing the financial backing for this program.
Okay, and how large is ours? I don't know.
The money we have, we started out this year with a reserve of $6.8 million with Valley Schools, and we prepaid a little over $19 million. So we have 16 or 17 million in there through the end of January. But as they stated, we'll have to run out our cost. So it'll be minimum of October before we saw any of that balance.
All right, and so that 17 million compares to the 200 plus the 70 million that you gave as an example for two other clients.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to jump in with a question. Can you speak to the guarantee that I heard of for our employees transferring over and all the fun that is, the guarantee your company's made about helping with that process?
So it's a process. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's a process to move employee benefits, but we've staffed up and we're ready to do it. We're doing that right now with Chandler, which is 3,200 employees, and that, I encourage you, if you have any questions, to call Chandler School District because they're very, very happy with how that's going. We have a team from Blue Cross Blue Shield representatives who aren't even here also that will also be with us. Our team, Tanya will be the implementation specialist for representing Kairos. Blue Cross Blue Shield has their, and then all of the ancillary benefits we have implementation specialists. So we're going to work with the benefits department to get all the communication out to the employees. And we're going to have that done because we have been working as if you guys were going to join us, knowing that this was a tight time frame. So we're ready tomorrow to start. If they called us in tomorrow, we will be there tomorrow. And we'll start working on that communication for your employees, with the understanding that on May 8th, we have to be ready to go around to all your sites and say, we're ready to enroll all of your employees. Here's the changes, here's what it means to you as an employee and your family, help you make some decisions on your health insurance, individual employees on their health insurance, and then get them enrolled into the system and communicate with all of the providers. So we're staffed up, we're ready to go on that, and we've been doing that.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Board Member Kirby?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith, clarification question for me. I should know this, but with our current provider, Valley Trust, are we in our own pool, or are we in a bigger pool with other
We are
districts?
in a bigger pool. But we are isolated in that pool,
Self-insured.
self-insured.
I understand we're
But
self-insured.
they're pooling the participants to get the volume
So
and the
where
pricing.
Kairos stated that repeatedly, Chandler would have their pool, or we would have our own. I'm just trying to draw a distinction here, and maybe if there isn't a distinction, maybe there isn't
On
one.
the health insurance, there isn't. On the health insurance, you're self-insured, you'll be self-insured with us.
Okay,
The biggest change for your health insurance is that you're going from United to Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's the biggest change. What we did do is we matched or mirrored your existing plan designs, so your employees they don't go from a $500 deductible to a $1,500 deductible unless they choose to do that. So they can stay in their existing plans. We've mirrored those as best we can, and I think it's very, very, very close. We have some enhancements, some slight enhancements, and some slight, probably decline in coverage for them, but minimal, and I think almost unnoticeable to your employees.
okay. What about the 6.5 million? That's,
The 6.8 that rolled over is in the pool with Valley Schools, and then we prepaid, so this year runs out because employee coverage is good through June 30th.
okay, my question is, the 6.5 million, is that money pooled and invested with other school districts' monies?
Yes,
And with Kairos, will it be pooled and invested with Chandler's monies, for example?
We'll have the same investment management, and it will be pooled, but it'll be counted for separately.
Is it counted for separately? I'm trying to draw a
Yes,
distinction, if
yes.
any. Okay, so that there is really no distinction there.
it's probably the reporting. And then, I don't know for sure what your policy is, but I know with Valley Schools, we must prepay by September 1st so that we get our full share of our interest. Is that true on yours?
We're going to require you to pay at least 4 months' worth of premium. You don't have to prepay everything, but you can and earn the investment income if you want.
Okay.
I think I need to make it very clear, we're not going to invest your funds outside of Title 35. Title 35 is the statute that dictates how public funds can be managed or be invested. We are going to invest according to Title 35. If we didn't do that, we believe that would be circumventing the law, and we're not going to do that.
Okay, so if I could ask one last question, then if Ms. Smith will if you will just wrap this all up for me, and it's similar to Ms. Hartman's question, what were the key decision points that led the committee towards this recommendation?
Well, I'm not sure if you had heard it or not, but the first question the committee asked Valley Schools was, I hear we're in the red with Valley Schools, which is not true. At one time, when we first started, we were, but as we grew with them, our investment pool and our claims ratio got us a bigger balance. So this year, we expect that balance to grow as they pay out the claims. The committee liked the Blue Cross Blue Shield coverage. The prices are less. Although Valley Schools offered to match, that came about because we were doing due diligence and cost association. As we've said before, we want transparency. We're going to look at all of our expenditures rather than just assume that's the best deal. That's how this all began. The committee was very excited about it. They did not know we could go out and shop, and we did. The third vendor was not able to do the self-insured risk. Although we could rent management if we wanted to. That's not what I thought. We would want to keep our same program going. So it was the coverage, it was the transparency, and it was the Blue Cross Blue Shield that offered some benefits the other program didn't have.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions?
And I'm going to add one last piece to that for Laura's piece. What I heard from the committee, they were very impressed with the professionalism and the focus on the services that this organization presented in their presentation. So I think it's important to note that since you're sitting here, that your presentation came across as extremely professional.
Thank you.
It did, and I will say, in addition, since you brought that up, that one or two of the committee members were uncomfortable in the first presentation because it wasn't always positive.
Board Member Beckham. Oh, do you want clarification?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and, she just wants to clarify that.
I would like to clarify that because I'm a bit confused. Who was Kairos the first presentation?
Oh, no, the high schools was.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Board Member Beckham. I knew what she meant. Your mic on?
Clarification on the statute 35 that you keep on referring to, and that's how you will manage the funds. Since it's probably a statute looking out for public entities, is there a cap on the management fee that you would be paying? Or do you have one within your trust?
That will be up to the governing board of Kairos, because we won't be selecting the investment manager. The Kairos board will be selecting that. I can tell you that in our other pools, there's a graduated scale of fees, and we're extremely, extremely happy with the low level of fees that we're paying for the Arizona School Trust and the Arizona School Alliance. I'm not saying that's going to be the investment manager, that's not my decision,
Right.
but that is a very aggressive, I want to say, a very fair fee basis that we pay them, and it's on a graduated scale. As assets increase, fees drop. So the more members we get into Kairos, the less expenses are going to be.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Hartman?
All right, I have one last pragmatic question, and that is, what I heard you say is that the Blue Cross Blue Shield coverage was better, or perceived better, by the committee over United.
Yes.
United offered to come back and match the price.
Yes.
So I also know changing coverage for 3,000 employees is a large effort. So does the additional coverage being provided through Kairos and Blue Cross Blue Shield exceed the effort that it's going to take to transition 3,000 people to a new
I'm
new system?
positive it will be smooth. In fact, I have a benefits committee meeting in the morning at 10 o'clock to see whatever the board decides, we'll be ready. My team's on, and we'll start getting ready for the open enrollment, which is very important that the teachers can enroll before the year is out.
Okay.
So that was the point of this coming around so fast. On the insurance committee meeting, they met, we're bringing it to you.
Okay. And they would have had to re-enroll either way. Is
Yes.
that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not necessarily more effort.
No, but it may look a little different.
Okay.
But the policies are the same. You know, they match A with A and B with B, and the ancillary benefits will be available that were available before. It may not be the exact company.
Okay. All right, any further questions or comments? No? Are you ready to make a motion? I will attempt to. I'll make a motion that we approve the employee health insurance vendor that was recommended by the insurance committee.
Name it.
Kairos, all right? It's, where do you see that? Oh, see, I don't have that part, I just have the agenda. Is it recommended, so I make a motion that we approve the district employee insurance vendor Kairos Health Arizona, Inc. for the school year 2018. Who was that? I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Board Member Kravitz, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. All right, so we're going to move on to information discussion item 10A, Auditor General Report Classroom Spending Fiscal Year 16, and update on performance audit concerning transportation.
Let's make sure this works. This one? All right. Every year, the Auditor General gets the audit files from every district, and they issue an annual report comparing everything. Now, a few years ago, Scottsdale Unified School District was under the performance audit, which every district in the state eventually gets. The report And the Auditor General staff, how they go through that performance audit has changed over the years greatly. So we'll talk about that, but this is the annual report based on FY16, which, as you know, you approved the annual report in October. It takes till February to get these back. So I've cut and pasted the big pieces of this because it compares us with peers. Now, the Auditor General determines who our peers are, and it's clearly stated under operational efficiency, we're considered a Peer 1 and a T5. So only Peer 1s and T5s get compared. Achievement, we're a 2. So you can see that we get 53.6 cents to every dollar into the classroom. And then the administration, you can see each of these, you know how to read, and it's a pie chart. So on the operational side, that's pretty hard to do because a lot of our expenses have nothing to do with the classroom. Utilities have nothing to do with the classroom. Only certain benefits do. There's food service. There's all kinds of other support services that it takes to get kids through school. Over on the right-hand side is our, this piece of it here is the assessments. So just so you can see, if you look at average teacher salary, the district, which is Scottsdale, gets $48,853, which is higher than the other two. Included in there is our 301 money, and so, you know, no one has out-delivered on that. Our teachers, we have less new teachers. The first 3 years are considered, you know, a growing stage for a teacher. The next page has the efficiency measures up there, which you can see that this is only Scottsdale there, and the orange areas are considered high or very high, depending on how bad it was. In our food service, obviously, we do very well. The peer group, once again, will be according to those criteria, and then, of course, the state average. So even though our district admin cost per pupil is higher than our peers, we are less than the state average. So as you're going to get more students in, that cost per pupil obviously goes down. And that's a summary down below, and it has the difference between 15 and 16. The revenues are over here. Our local revenues are very high because we don't get state aid. So our property taxes pay for our schools. Our financial stress, the only concern they have is declining enrollment. And everything else looks good. So you might have wondered who are our peer groups, so I thought I would tell you. The Group 1 and T5 is Mason Unified, Peoria Unified, Phoenix Union, and Tucson Unified School District. And on our achievement group is Chandler, Deer Valley, Dysart, J.O. Combs, Marana, Paradise Valley, Peoria, Prescott, and Queen Creek. And if you noticed up on the first chart, it had our scores, and we do very well on that. Now, this is what it is over the last few years. So one of the things that stood out is obviously you look at your bottom dollars, we keep getting, the costs are going up, what we're spending. Our classroom was the highest here. But if you recall, we had, in our performance audit, when the Auditor General actually comes in and looks at your books, looks at all your coding, we had some irregular coding, such as I think we were coding electricity to the classroom. So that explains that. We also had psychologists coded to the classroom, which seems normal. But the problem with that is they aren't in the classroom. They're servicing students. So they're actually in support. So you can see that the support costs have gone up, and that explains some of those changes. Now, this is a pie chart of the report. So you can see as a bulk. And we now actually consider the student support, the instructional support, and instruction dollars in the classroom. So you can add these up. So we're getting really close to 75% there. Now, I did the same report, the same criteria using just M&O dollars, because that's what our taxpayers pay for. So I thought that that was important to do, and you can see that it runs basically the same. And so this is by object, which, as you can see, benefits in FY16 were 21.29% of a very large budget. So when we examine those insurance costs, it's important because this is the only benefit that I can chop. I can't chop Arizona State Retirement, I can't chop taxes, but I can chop benefits, insurance. And so we have a lot of purchase service. That's what the PS is for. So we have some purchase services we're required to have, which would include our annual audit and some legal. So the purchase property service sometimes is required because maybe the audiologist has to have their machine calibrated. That's a highly technical position, and that has to be outsourced. And we don't spend very much money in supplies overall. So to go back to the original performance audit, this is the rules that it goes by. So 12 days after the 100th day, which has already passed for this year, you must report your first 100th day actual route to school miles, and then you estimate your last 80. Cleverly, a lot of us multiply that number times 0.8. The vehicle inventory report is due just after the close of the year because on June 30th, you're supposed to read all the odometers on your fleet. And then that calculates how many miles you drove. This is the definition of a route mile because they only pay us for route miles, which is home to school. Now, if you contract some of that, you can use that as well. One of the districts we're compared to in that performance audit actually buys tokens for transportation for students as an option rather than driving a bus. We don't do that, so our buses, the wheels on the bus have to go round and round for us to get the credit for it. So this is a sample of the route report from that year. When they submitted the report, we have average daily miles of 9,423, and we carry 4,858 eligible students. They're only eligible if they live a mile from the school. We may choose to transport students that are closer because there's a major thoroughfare, there's something in the neighborhood you don't want your kids hanging out at while they wait for a bus. So you can transport those kids, but you don't get reimbursed for it. And then we run some summer school, or down here is your ESY. It's if it's in their IEP and they're required to have more education. We get credit for those too. So I did the final page, and it shows right here that in FY16 we drove just under 2 million miles on our school buses. So I cleverly calculate the cost per mile by how much did we spend in transportation divided by how many miles. And then how many riders, the cost per rider would be the eligible riders divided with that number. We had a finding in transportation that the Auditor General said that we should develop and monitor performance measures such as cost per mile, cost per rider, and the bus capacity. Now, only the Transportation Department can give me the utilization because I can't go to every bus and count. But the little K3 guys, they'll share seats because that's cool, but a high schooler, it's not very cool. So if we hit 75% overall, the Auditor General thinks we're doing a great job. This was in FY12, I believe. And so just last March, you approved the purchase of the routing software. We did TransFinder, and we also bought Zonar, which is a great safety feature because the drivers have to take this reader, and it shows they did a pre-trip and a post-trip, and it keeps track of some of the maintenance features. So I'm not sure why it took that long, but it did. And that could improve some of our efficiency. We'll have to see how it implements. So, as you know, Scottsdale, minimum state standards is not the way we operate. So, as you know, Board Member Kirby put a match out for the robotics travel. That competition was very expensive. That gets coded to student transportation. So it gets calculated in the cost per mile, even though it's not our bus. So we put some pictures up here. You can see if you hire a motor coach, it's going to be coded to student transportation. But we're not getting any mileage. And here's some international pictures. We know we've sent kids overseas. It's a great experience. I don't think we want to stop doing that. But once again, we're paying a vendor to transport our kids, and it gets calculated into the cost, even though the wheels on the bus aren't going round and round. So this is just an example of some of the stuff that drives up that cost. So here, I took all the expenditures coded to student transportation paid from other funds besides our tax base. You don't have to count your 800 funds. So these are the ones that get in there, and you can see there's an extra $1 million that has paid for student transportation that added to the overall cost. Are you with me so far? That's why our transportation costs are high.
Very similar to what we've heard in the past. Yeah. This is all very similar to what we've heard in the past.
Oh, okay. So what I did then is calculate, this is the schools down at the bottom are the comparisons in our performance audit, why our costs were so high. So I used the same districts. And so this is the cost per ADM. So that's the funding they receive from the state. And you can see that we're not in bad company, we're less than the average. Now, this is a different group than the other because the criteria to the Auditor General was the riders had to go 386 miles or more. So with that, Scottsdale's fine there. This is the miles. Oh, it was 380. It was 368, I think it was. So Scottsdale's at 394. You know, that's how many miles per eligible rider. And so this is our cost per eligible rider. And this is what they were wondering, why do we monitor this? And so we are monitoring this. And this district uses tokens rather than buses. They have city tokens. And so this is our cost per mile paid from M&O. All of these last charts were based on tax money as compared to the other activities. So at this point in time, now we get $2.56 last year per mile. So every mile is a loss to a point, but we get more revenue than we spend in transportation because it's prior years transportation support level. Although that is under consideration at some time for a budget cut. Anything else? Did that answer your questions? Do you have any comments?
Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. This transportation's been my hot button for years.
Mm-hmm.
I think some can attest to this on the board. And yes, you're bringing new metrics to us that the board hasn't seen publicly before.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I had done so many Excel gymnastics, I'd seen quite a bit of that. Yes, it said the audit said we weren't tracking it, we weren't doing our costs per rider, now we're doing that. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But if you go back to that Auditor General report, I don't know if we were like burgundy red, bright red, I'm pretty sure our transportation was not green. It wasn't really good.
Right.
Okay, so what we've heard before on this board is that is because we're Scottsdale and we travel nicely. But so does Chandler, and so does Gilbert. And when you compare us to those districts, which weren't on the cost per, weren't on these
Exactly.
slides.
So they were not in your performance audit either. These
Are
were
the
the
ones-
groups that were in your performance audit. That's why I did
Okay.
this.
So, can you then help me understand, because, and I think I read this once, but I don't really remember. Why is Scottsdale compared to Yuma? Why does the auditor choose to put us with Yuma and Buckeye, for example, as opposed to a Chandler and a Gilbert and a
That's a
Paradise
great-
Valley?
That's a great question. It used to be, when they first started doing these years ago, the auditor general used to come into a district and camp out for months. Now they don't. They figure out they can't afford to do that. And they can't get half of them to go to rural Arizona anyhow. So they'll come camp out in Scottsdale, but they won't camp out in Mohawk Valley. The criteria they chose to compare us on this was how many miles does the rider ride? Not are you rural, are you in town, are you a union, are you an L, are you a unified? That criteria is established when the Auditor General first shows up at your district. So if nobody argued that case, once they start.
Okay. All right. So when I did the analysis on my own, I did compare us to the Chandler, and I can dig that out and send it to you. It's a couple years old at this point. But what I concluded, just from using publicly available reports, a couple of which
That's
you
what
showed
this is,
tonight,
yeah.
is that we had excess capacity. It appeared versus those other districts. They were utilizing the seats that
The
they
seats
had
on the
more
bus.
efficiently
Yes,
compared to us.
that's probably very true.
And what is driving that?
Well, that's a routing software that we've just purchased, and we may see an improvement there, okay? Because the goal is to fill up the seats. The bus costs just as much to drive empty as it is full.
Right.
So what you want to do is get your routing, but there's always challenges. It's which school is the bus going to? You know, are they all going at once? Where does the bus start? Where does it stop? I know that, like in California, they've had more troubles than we have as far as like transportation costs. So I know a director there who told me not only do they wait a mile to go to that first stop, they wait a mile to go to the second stop. They go another mile before they hit the third stop. So that's not the way we do practice in Arizona.
So also, we have, since this audit, reduced some of the routes.
Yes.
So that's the first thing that Jeff did, and then he got the software, which I'm sure we'll look at even more. But the other thing is how our bell schedules are set up. So that's the other piece, and then not to open a can of worms, but not knowing the history in Scottsdale, but just to say this, and it's the parents that are listening, we're not changing the bell schedule, we're just discussing transportation. But when you don't have tiered starts,
Yes.
you run into transportation problems. So in trying to keep everybody at the same start time, what you've created is more bus routes. And so that's a problem. If we wanted to reduce our costs, the first thing we should do is change our bell schedules and tier our bell schedules. If we had at least 3 tiers like Chandler and others have, we would reduce cost.
And like we used to have, just saying.
Well-
Just saying, not that long ago, we were too.
Yeah, and so you have every bus out there trying to get somewhere at the same time. So the bus can't go deliver an elementary school and then go back and pick up high schoolers on the same bus. They're all doing the same thing.
Board Member Kirby.
So, okay, so a question that I've always asked, and I've never gotten a good answer to, and I'm going to try it again today. We all drive around Scottsdale, and we see the yellow buses. I don't know, that's 80-seaters, I guess, or the really
Yeah,
long ones?
yes,
And
86.
we always see probably at
Kids.
least half empty, if
Yeah,
not more.
yes.
On a daily basis.
Right.
And one question I've always had is, yes, I know we do need to keep some of the 80-seaters to transport the football teams and the band and all that stuff. But is there any opportunity for us to reduce the size, not the size of the entire fleet,
Right.
because that's a routing thing.
The size of the capacity of the bus. You can buy smaller capacity buses. They're obviously easier to maneuver around some of the areas if that's a problem. But the cost of the bus is not a lot less. That's probably bad English, but it's probably $10,000 less to buy a 48-passenger bus over an 86-passenger bus.
But what about the ongoing operating costs? Because I know when I had a Lexus, it ate up gas a lot faster than,
Right.
you know, my daughter's Jeep or whatever.
Yes. The operating cost is the same. It's still insurance, it's still fuel, it's still either diesel. You know, I know that one of the things we're looking at down the road is to go to an alternative energy, which would cost less.
So you're saying that to put gas,
The mileage
size
isn't
of the
going to reduce.
80-foot bus doesn't burn more fuel than the size of not foot, 80-seater than a
The
40.
weight of the bus is not that significantly different. But
will
the
say that-
capacity, you could drive up your occupancy rates.
Right, and Jeff Cook, our transportation director, is looking at the next purchases being a smaller bus, not all 85 passengers. So he is going to and I think it's a 60-something.
Well, there's several. There's,
So he's looking at some smaller buses as we replace and replace and renew. He's looking at some smaller buses, because we do have some buses that are sitting half empty.
Because this is part of our.
And that is all available on the vehicle inventory report, which is public information. It tells you how many seats are on each one of the buses and whether it's a special ed bus or if it's alternative fuel.
Okay. And one thing that I've never seen here in SUSD is a replacement policy.
That would be a
An
very
asset, a
good thing
bus
to have.
A bus replacement, so that things like once you're spending so much in maintenance cost annually on a bus because it's so old, it kicks in, or once it gets to a certain age, you know, it kicks in to hit that replacement.
Right.
And is that something that other districts have? Is that something that
In
school districts?
theory, but because they've reduced our capital funds so much, it's very hard to do. But a bus runs basically, I say free of charge, but tires and belts and oil changes, that's about all it takes for the first 100,000 miles. So if your bus costs $150,000, you can get 100,000 miles out of it. It basically just very low maintenance, and after that you start replacing all those parts. But there's plenty of bus out there with a couple 100,000 miles on it, because we can't burn through our money and replace those buses at what my trade. If you bring Jeff in here, he'd say, great, let's buy 15 buses a year so we can just keep it going.
Well, and the reason I'm asking these questions, because we did put transportation and buses in our bond.
Yeah, you did, and we do have a schedule, and I've just made a note to have Jeff come and talk about it, because he does have a replacement
Yes.
schedule. I've seen it.
Okay. And does it have having a replacement schedule that's supported by a policy to drive that schedule, is there a policy?
I'll ask him that question.
Okay.
That I do not know. He also has the inventory and can show you the average age of our buses, and he has
You don't want to.
great maintenance records. What's that?
They're old.
They're old. Well,
But they're
in
not those older
comparison, I've worked in
some, yeah.
places where they're older.
Yeah.
All right. Board Member Kravitz.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell, for referencing the start time impact on transportation costs. If you want some more information on parent input, you can go, you can go back a couple of years and you'll see a lot of parent input on that. I'm looking at this slide and it shows that we spend.
$3.73.
Free, but am I on here? But on the Auditor General fiscal year 16 report, it shows 446.
Yes. Okay, I'm using just M&O dollars here. Yeah, no, the other ones are going to involve all those other funds. Yeah, and all the expenses that don't involve the yellow school bus.
Oh, also,
That was a big aha for me.
how many, do we pick up students from outside of our district who are
Yes, we do.
And how far out do we go?
Can't remember what that little place is called, between Cave Creek. Thank you. Rio Verde. So at one time, there was an undesignated area between Cave Creek, ourselves, and they could have chosen, I guess, Fountain Hills. But the families have chosen, we send, I believe, 2 buses up there, and we actually pick up quite a few families.
And do we get
Reimbursement for that?
No. you
No, it's just, I
shouldn't,
mean,
no.
there's no, it's just.
That's our choice, to get the
We choose
kids
to
and
take
get the
their ADM.
ADM.
Okay,
So we get money, but it doesn't contribute towards
Transportation.
Yeah, and last I checked, that's 2 buses.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Cave Creek would like us to stop.
Yes, I'm sure they
Would
would.
like the ADM.
So there's no, like, policy of if you want to come to our school, you bring your child to the closest bus stop?
It's a district choice to, when it's been an unincorporated area, of whether or not they choose to run a bus there. And so it was unincorporated for a long time. Now it's actually part of the Cave Creek School District, but because the families had already committed, we've continued to service those families.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so any additional
one last
questions?
comment.
Oh, sorry, Board Member Kirby?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the information tonight, because yes, much of what you said we had heard, but it wasn't necessarily supported with the facts and the figures to back that up. So I appreciate you doing this analysis for us. And I also heard we're using the routing system, and then we hope to see more efficiencies. Are we going to build those efficiencies into the budget?
No.
No, it's a
And
separate pot of money.
fuel has gone down the last few years, as you all know. So if we were to get a spike in fuel, we have to have the contingency there to make up for that. And obviously, when fuel goes up, tires go up, and hoses go up, and everything else. So we've been very lucky that those costs are so low.
So could I make a request that we pull that out as the contingency in the transportation budget as a separate item somewhere, or separate dollar amount, so that we can start to drive efficiencies in our budget?
We'll have the funds available if they're needed, because you have to get kids to school, just like you have to feed them.
I understand that.
Monitor it separately, I think,
Yeah.
is what you're saying, right? To just,
What I'm saying is, if we're going to get some efficiencies with this routing software, we should be able to project how much that's going to save us. I understand you want to leave it in transportation to offset any fuel increases or whatever, but if we're going to save $150,000, and let's carve that out and keep it as a contingency that's a separate bucket in the transportation budget. So that we know.
I think what they're going to have to do is, this software they just got, there's a lot of input that has to be done in order to establish. I mean, in the old days, you put a pin on the map and figure how many kids were going to what school at that stop. So that's something that Mr. Cook will have to talk about. But yes, we'll have the contingency there, if that's what you request. I don't have any problem with that, but I can't guess the efficiency that's going to come about when he has other factors that are there.
well, I think what we're really saying is try to create a predictive model out of what we learned from these savings, and I think that's what we'll work on.
Yeah.
But we'll get with Jeff and see how he did with the first reduction of the first 3, because now he's got some data behind that, and then we'll look as we go forward, what will it look like. In addition to, we've put off the expenditures of the buses for a year or 2, and as those get smaller, what will happen with capacity. So we'll continue to put a plan together.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? I just want to add that, yeah, it was a big aha moment for me. While it may have been, they may have attempted to describe the difference between our yellow buses and all of that, and the bus the charter bus my daughter takes to, California on her orchestra
Yes.
trip. How different that looks when you've put it all in for the general audit.
Yes.
And when you take those trips out, and you're just talking about the cost of getting our kids from home to school, how much better we actually look.
Yes.
That was a big aha for me. So I appreciate that and bringing me to that
Excellent.
level of understanding. And I too think, still within it, I think we all believe there's efficiencies to be found. and to keep track of that and know where we are moving forward and where that contingency is. It's great. So we are.
Governing Board, if I might make a suggestion, can we have a 5-minute recess?
Absolutely. I was just hearing this in both ears, so yes, we will take a 5-minute break.
It's not on.
Information discussion item 10B, update on International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program.
Governing Board, thank you. So Dr. Johnson is here with the two principals. Now, remember that we had a presentation earlier in the year, and they said after they had gone through, I can't remember the title of the workshop you went through, that they would be back to give you an update, and here they are. So we are excited to hear where you're at in the process.
Okay. Thank you, President Perlberg, Governing Board members, Superintendent Birdwell, and Sandra. In November, you were presented with an update on the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program. And at that time, staff was directed to do a feasibility study, bring back those results, and then also the admin teams were going to have training in January. So we are back to provide an update for you. And I just want to highlight a couple of items in the feasibility study before we go through the PowerPoint presentation. If you look on page 3, stakeholder input, we wanted to provide you with the information on what each principals and schools had done with the since the November meeting, the meetings that they had held, the email communications they had done since that time. Number 6 on the organization and staffing. It's not in their packet. Oh, they can't get it?
I have it on mine. It's on board book. It's on board book.
Can we get to board book now?
Yeah.
I'm in board book, and it's not on here.
Right, it wasn't.
Really?
It's on page 44 of board book.
I have 17 pages in my board book. You're looking at the.
Sorry.
Hang on a minute.
Are you looking at the overview?
No, I got it.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Is yours working now, Kim? Because I know earlier.
Page 44?
I need to get that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm with you now.
Okay.
It looks like this. Is it a hard copy?
Yeah.
Does anybody need a hard
Mine's 44, but I saved it.
All your notes are in there, all the secret notes.
That's why mine isn't going up there, sorry.
Thanks, ladies. Appreciate it.
Okay, let me go back to the stakeholder input number 4. Is the first area I would like to highlight. On this area is the information of what each school has done in their stakeholder input, the meetings they've held, the communications that they have emailed and put on their webpage at both Mountainside Middle School and Desert Mountain High School. You'll hear a little bit more about the staffing in the PowerPoint presentation, but I just wanted to point out that there is a job description of the MYP coordinators. They are each a .4 at each of the schools, which mirrors the current IB coordinator position at Desert Mountain High School. It's a .4 that's already implemented. When you look at number 7, the timeline, we fleshed out and added more specificity. We've added months and dates where we could to help you see a better timeline, and we'll cover that in more detail in the PowerPoint. And then on page 6 is an updated budget. There is a significant decrease in what was presented in November, and once again, we will talk about that in detail with the PowerPoint. And then the findings and recommendations section, we'll talk a little bit more during the PowerPoint, but I wanted just to highlight a couple of the areas of the feasibility study for you. And we're going to let Principal Cohen start.
Thank you. It feels so good to be up here talking about MYP after having some training. So I'm very excited about that. We attended the training in January, and this is, for some of you, this is a little bit of a review, really, and an overview. And so MYP, Middle Years Program, International Baccalaureate, is most importantly, what I say to my parents is, if you don't listen to anything else I say, it's for all students. Yes, it supports and will feed into the diploma program, the junior senior program eventually, which is a choice program, but it is for all students. It is an all-inclusive program, and boy, did we learn that in January. Middle school is a time when students are figuring out their identity and digging deep in that self-esteem, and it's such a perfect match because MYP is developed to go beyond the classroom and to really find a connection for them, hence international. So this will look familiar to some of you. MYP is, the big curricular difference is not only in the names, but there are 8 core subject areas that students will have. If you approve this Tuesday night, we will be implementing 8 core subjects in, don't tell me, in, I get my years mixed up, in 17-18. So language and literature, individuals and societies, math, design, the arts, science, phys ed and health, and language acquisition, which is significant. Language acquisition, that all 3-year students will be required to take a foreign language, will not be an option, hence the 8 periods instead of 7. In the design program, I'm so proud to speak towards, because I actually do have a similar course right now that's an elective at Mountainside. It will need some work and some tweaking for sure. That's what the training is for through IB. So we're in really good shape for that design course, which I'm really proud of. But the big difference in the curriculum model for MYP, remember, this is not a curriculum change. It's all about the approach to the learning. It's integration, it's unit planning, it's, again, making those strong connections outside the classroom, and students finding a purpose in that learning. So that it is not, there's no different books, there's no, like I said, no different curriculum. It is the approach we take to the learning, and connecting the subject areas, being very, very precise about that. And at the end, remember, MYP is 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. It's 5 years. And by the 10th grade year, they will have a personal project, culminating project of the 5 years. That is, that work begins in the middle school years, and we celebrate that their sophomore year. So that is, that's a big, like I said, a big project due at the end of their 5th year. All right, there's the graph I don't like to explain. So this is Miss Wolfert's job.
We drew straws, and I get this graph. Yeah, the circle ones, and it's colorful. So this, again, is the same graphic that was shared with you in November. But just kind of to review that with you briefly, we are in the consideration phase of the program and the school profile.
And the way the graph works, there's kind of ongoing pieces at the bottom and then the individual pieces across the top. The request for candidacy, application for candidacy, we're kind of just dancing on the line of that little box right now, waiting, of course, for approval. Then there's the decision of candidacy by IB. They, of course, decide whether we get the green light when all this is said and done. Then there's the candidate phase that we would move into. So during the candidacy phase, there's a consultation that includes one visit to the school. There's a request for authorization application. Then there's a verification visit. They will come and check out everything that we have in place and make sure that we're good to go. And then a decision from IB as to official authorization or not. Then those little arrows down on the bottom, school heads, as they call it in the world of IB, attend the Category 1 workshop, and you can start sending teachers to workshops. We have not sent teachers yet. We, of course, have all attended that heads of school training, but we're waiting to send teachers until we have board approval and are really moving full steam ahead. Then across that bar that sort of covers a few different phases, there's the completion of teacher professional development. In other words, we got to start sending all of our academic folks and getting them trained so that they understand the unit planning and all the specifics. And then, of course, ongoing commitment to professional development. That ongoing commitment is different than maybe some programs in that you don't need everyone to get retrained on a particular basis. What will happen with IB is there may be a change to a specific process in a specific area. So maybe in English, there's some adjustment made or a new expectation, then you would just send your English folks for that particular purpose. Unlike some programs where there's sort of an annual expectation of certain trainings and it's very costly, IB works a little more like AP in that once you go, you're pretty much good. You can go to little refresher courses, but you really don't need to go to another full training until there's some sort of change to be implemented. Okay, so the authorization timeline. Again, some of this will look familiar. In November, we presented at the study session and then, of course, at the board meeting. In January, we attended that heads of school training. The feasibility study has sort of been ongoing during that time period, which you've now got in front of you. And then, of course, you know what's going on today and the 25th. So moving to the 17-18 piece of the timeline, this is where our teacher training really needs to hit the ground running so that they can start implementing the curriculum and the units. July, MYP coordinator positions need to be implemented at both sites. We need very much for those coordinators to be in place as we are writing the application for IB so that they are really on the ground floor of that process and understand where we're going and how we got there once we arrive at that destination. November, as the high school planning guide process takes place, there will need to be some changes for the new courses being added and adjustments there. Ongoing marketing strategies, continuing community education and promotion, especially at the middle school level, but really in both locations. And then April 1st of 2018 would be our actual deadline for submitting the application to IB. 18-19, a number of items ongoing there. Candidate school, academic year and length. So that is the school year that we will actually hopefully be considered a candidate school. Continued teacher professional development as we send sort of batches of teachers at a time until everyone is up to speed. Ongoing marketing, of course, and community education and promotion. To be determined, the IB consultation. Of course, IB decides when they're going to come do that consultation. So that would sort of be at their request. And then April of 2019 would be our request for authorization, and in May, the verification visit. Then 1920, we would hope to be authorized IB MYP schools, continued professional development, continued marketing, and of course, ongoing sustainability plans to keep the program up and running. I will turn over this piece to Cecilia to talk about budget, and I will apologize at this time. I have a 5:30 doctor's appointment, so I'm going to slip out and let her take over. Thank you.
Nikki, thank you very much.
There's been some adjustments to the budget, and usually they go up when you're working on projects, and I'm happy to inform you that it's gone down. Yeah. The first year was projected to be $14,000, but we rolled in the application candidacy fee to the next year, 17-18, adjusted the timeline a little bit. We also adjusted the annual candidacy cost. We would have paid that in 17-18, and it will not be paid 17-18 due to this little bit of a delay in implementation at this time. So 10,000 instead of 14,000 for this year. We've completed that, so there's no additional cost at this point. 17-18, it was 86,450, but that's because we continue to roll in to the next year, which seems like it'll cost more money, but we have some savings coming up. So if you look at 18 and 19, this is where you begin to see the savings. And there is a $60,000 savings in the additional staffing, which is always good to hear. When they completed their training and actually looked at their staffing and what courses needed to change, what additional staffing they needed, they realized that they have all the staffing they need, but maybe a couple of sections. So they cut that item down, 30,000, cut it in half for each of the schools. So it was 205,520. It is now 145,520. And then this is our final year where we hope to be in full implementation. And for implementation, again, we have the decrease of that additional staffing that we do not believe we're going to need. We already staffed for this number of students, so that would be in your regular allocation for staffing. You see there's a personal project advisor stipend, but that was already in the budget. So again, we have a decrease in 2019-20 where it was presented to you earlier at $251,450. It is now $191,450. And that would be the ongoing costs to sustain the program. However, I do want to point out that with marketing and the excitement of community and the closeness to Fountain Hills with an IB program that is in the middle years, you also anticipate having additional enrollment, which then will cover the cost getting your ADM for those additional students. So originally, it was projected at $557,420, and you can see the 4-year commitment that takes us through 2020 is now $426,970. So it's a savings of $130,450 since it was implemented.
Dr. Johnson, can I ask you a question, and maybe Principal Kellen can help with this, but I liked what you were just saying, and I did a quick little math moment of what we fund per student ADM. And so basically, the first 90 to 100 students pays for the entire program. And if I read your notes correctly, you said when you met with the 5th grade parents, you had an amazing response with parents. Could you share just a little bit of that?
Yeah, they are, my 5th grade parents are very, very enthusiastic. The challenge of marketing MYP is it's a 2-year process to implement. So I have to be very transparent about that. And, next school year, I'm not labeled an IB school or the next. So when that happens, I think is really when we're going to see that growth. But there is nothing but enthusiasm for MYP and Mountainside's community.
So even though we won't have the label in, it would be critical in our marketing to let people know it's coming, because then where we typically in this region see a little bit of a decrease in the 6, 7, and 8, not necessarily in your school, but even one of your sister schools, this might be the program that actually attracts and keeps our parents, because we're competing with the Great Hearts Basis kinds of models. So this is exciting.
I'm very confident it will do that.
The cost over the 4-year period is just, given what we would get back in student ADM, is really amazing to me. So enlightening. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So this is putting all of them in a different format for the budget so you can see the complete 4-year plan. More detail a little bit on what goes into the costs in the information below. As with all new projects, there are challenges, and these challenges were identified and shared at November. But we see no problems with any of these and being able to mitigate these problems. They are problems we typically face every year in a lot of our programs anyway. Master scheduling, articulation of middle and high school schedules, as we always look at that. We always are reviewing our instructional minutes, so that would be part of the process. If we needed any additional staffing, we would review that, but we believe that we have accurately depicted that in this new budget projection. And there might be a little bit of movement with staff depending on how we do our world language, but we believe as we add world language at the 6th grade level, then we may be moving some of the staff down to the middle school. There might be a little switch in there and then adding additional staff to get higher levels of our world language at the top. And always when we introduce a program, there's an impact to electives, but traditionally these students still take an elective. They still will be involved in extracurricular. They're not totally isolated in IB program the entire time anyway. And then this transition from pre-diploma program from the IB MYP to the Desert Mountain, wanting to make sure we market well, that we prepare the kids well, that they feel when they're ready to go in the IB program, they're going to feel very confident then to seek that IB diploma. And our last slide just reiterates a little bit about our next steps, and thank you very much.
If I could just put a closure here. Governing Board, we're not going to ask you approval on Tuesday. I know that we'd like to expedite, but the reason that we're not going to do that is simply we want to finish the budgeting process and look at how our budget looks, and because remember that we're also going to try to do some predictive modeling. And in that process, be able to look at, once we commit, we want to say, we're going to commit to this for 4 years. We know we're headed there. We want to make sure that we're able to say, here's how we're going to fund this. And so that there's not geez, we fund you next year and then we pull out the funding. We do this, we want to show in our predictive model that this is part of our budgeting process so that you are comfortable in making that kind of commitment. Because one thing we don't want to do is get partway through it and not fund it. So I'm not asking you on Tuesday to do it because I want to build it into our budgeting process with that whole model of that 4-year support.
Right. Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. Really, Principal Kellen, if you can pass this along to Principal Wilford, thank you so much for your effort on this. Really is just outstanding work. We were excited about it the first time we heard about it, and it seems like your enthusiasm has only grown. I really wanted to compliment you on the feasibility study. I thought it was great when I read through it. What really did stick out to me was the stakeholder input process. I just wanted to compliment you on how inclusive and transparent and iterative the process was with all stakeholders. It really stood out. I think it's a model we could replicate often in our district. I also appreciate you saying it was for all children, because that was my one question, which is what the parent talked about. Can my, middle of the road or just average student, benefit from this?
And sorry, I am going to interrupt you.
Love
The
to.
few questions I get, that is the question I get. Is my student going to be okay? Is my average child going to be okay? They're going to be more than okay.
It's great. It's great to hear. So that was the one question I had. The other just little tactical question is, I can't see it in the presentation tonight, but I read it somewhere, there were 3 world languages. We're focused on Spanish, Mandarin, and French. I was just wondering what was behind the selection of those 3?
No, there is flexibility in that. It is what IB considers critical languages in the MYP program, and it happens to be what we have right now. Yay! But there is flexibility in that.
Okay, great.
But we are, at this point, we're really looking at those 3 languages.
All right, makes sense, but thank you, I'm glad, I appreciate it.
Of course.
Any additional questions? Or, no? Oh, Board Member Kravitz.
Dig nabbit. After the first 4 years and it's a full-blown program, I was just curious what the approximate cost is for the program after the first, after it's up and running.
After the $400,000.
After you've been approved and you've gotten the stamp of approval and we've made the initial
Yeah.
$426,000 blah, 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 investment. I'm just curious what the upkeep, so to speak.
Yeah, it would be similar to that last year, the 1920 year. However, with increased enrollment, it should be self-sustaining, and that's always our goal when we're implementing programs, is we want the sustainability, and that's why the marketing, community education, promotion is extremely important. But we believe we're going to have plenty, if not more, students be able to sustain this without a problem.
All right, thank you.
All right, Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. I have great confidence in Principal Kellen's ability to roll this thing out. She's got experience. I don't know if all of you know, but she was behind the foreign language immersion program at Pueblo. She launched that. So this is, she has much knowledge and experience she brings to the table. So I have a question on just the rollout. So if I'm reading this right, 1920 is when the school would, if the timeline holds, would become an MYP school. Does the whole school, like the curriculum, even for the 8th graders at that time, do they take on this curriculum, or is it going to phase in 6th graders first and then roll it forward?
No, it's the whole school, and I so appreciate the question because it took me a while to get my head around. In IB world, you are fully implemented before they come out to consider you a candidate.
Oh, okay.
So in 2 years, if we were to go forward, in 2 school years, I will be pretty much fully on board.
Oh, that is.
So 18, 19, you're actually, you're on, you're waiting for certification.
We're in it to win it by then, yeah. So,
Okay, so it would be year after next.
Mhm.
Okay.
So next year is going to be very busy.
Yeah. No, it's the year after next.
That would be, as you notice, next year, the planning guides would be updated with the actual courses, so the next year then they could be implemented.
So in 18, 19, your 8th graders at that time you're not going to just start with 6 and roll it. You're going to flip the whole school.
It's actually very important not to do that.
Oh, okay.
We need to be fully implemented because all the integration and cross disciplines and that all needs to be healthy and moving in the right direction before that 3rd year when we are considered a candidacy school.
So then the matriculation into high school is going to be a bit difficult for a couple of years,
Yes,
right?
it is. Yes, you are very correct.
So the freshmen that come in 1920 won't have the same MYP skills as the freshmen that come in 21, 22.
Right. And again, really appreciate the question, because we mentioned this in November. We will start out, our plan would be to start out that year, 1920, as a partial. We originally thought we were going to be full-blown into the high school, all students, but we are going to continue, because we learned that in January in our training, that we have that flexibility to be a school within a school, still at Desert Mountain, that year, and then the goal being school-wide after we have it.
Fully. Okay, so can I ask one more follow-up, Quinn, then I'll yield the microphone. So what % of Desert Mountain's freshmen come from Mountainside Middle? Does anyone know that?
Off the top of my head?
It's a better question for Principal Wilford, but does anyone?
I see Casey reaching for his computer.
It is the majority.
And I guess you probably can figure out where I'm going with that is, if Mountainside Middle is half or less, it's going to, I foresee a potential challenge of, at some point, the whole ninth grade going.
Yeah, and you're right. And if that, we will continue to look at that once Mountainside students are, their fourth year in it, that, when the sixth graders become freshmen, and maybe we maintain it a school within a school. But again, that's all flexible and things we will continue to look at.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Casey, you don't have to do that right now, but if you'll send that to me.
Okay, any other questions?
Love it.
No, good. Thank you so much. Exciting stuff at Mountainside. All right, so we will move on to item 10C, information discussion item, update on capital override and summer projects budgets for building services and technology.
So we're going to, I don't know if you want to grab yourself a slice of pizza while we switch over to a different PowerPoint,
Yep.
but you're certainly welcome to. We brought your dinner in to you. Julie, there's enough food that if you're all hungry, help yourself, please. But there is salad. We told you, golly, this was last spring. It's really taking me back. We said, I won't ask the governing board to spend any capital money until I can tell you where your fixed assets are. And that's really important because we had just finished up a technology, your capital override on technology. We had stretched it beyond its years. But one of the questions that came as well, as that we went out to the voters, do we need a renewal of technology? Is that really necessary? Mr. Hartwell is going to present to you where we are with fixed assets and technology to get a handle on. Before we give you an update of how we're spending the money, it's really important that we answer that question we told you we would. So these are tied together in the aspect of, before we tell you how we're spending the money on technology, let's tell you what you have. So, Mr. Hartwell, we'll turn that over to you and let you talk to the governing board about what you found.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell, Governing Board, President Perleberg, and Sandra. The good thing about combining functions, so you have technology, you have fixed assets, you have supply chain under one location, it's easier to get things done. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll step in. I talk funny anyway, so. So when Dr. Birdwell approached me about this, and we started this project, this particular project, and actually the 1st of November, I'm going to go through this with you. The issue was we didn't know what we had or where we had it or how old it was, and could we find that out before we thought about spending more money on this stuff, right? So it's quite an exercise. Believe it or not, there's 36 locations here. We've got 28 schools, but 36 locations. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to kind of my secret weapon here. Tony Harari, Tony used to have responsibility for applications and software only. In October, November timeframe, I also gave him responsibility for network and network administration. And in essence, Casey reports directly to Tony. So part of the presentation, Tony's going to go through, especially as it relates to what the current state was of our network, where we are now, and where we're going to take that. So So that'll be a good piece of it. And then I think that we also need probably, I know that I've already been given instructions here from Dennis. They only got 5 minutes, so I may have to do speed talk here. But there's a whole discussion around fixed assets and how we manage or haven't managed and need to work on that going forward. And when I heard the discussion about buses earlier, and I thought, well, I know exactly how many buses we got, and what the ages are, and where they're located right now, because they're part of the fixed assets. Everything except buildings. Buildings goes to Dennis, so I'll let him take care of that. But anyway. So we had 36 district locations that we reviewed. We had tech teams that we opened literally every door in the district, every closet. We took a look at classrooms to verify the technology on hand. And I'll show you in just a minute all the various technologies. But when we did this, you have to remember that several years ago, it was determined that on the stewardship items, anything below $1,000, we didn't have to worry about. It didn't have tags on it. It wasn't in a database. So it's no real surprise then that we really don't know what we've got less than 1,000. At one point in time, computers were 1,000 above, but they're much less than that now with much greater computing power. So we really have to manage what we have below $1,000. And you actually have a board policy to manage band equipment down to $150 as a board policy. Well, we actually implemented that now with also all fixed assets coming to a central location will be tagged and will be put into a database before it's ever distributed. So that's kind of an outcome. It was a 6-week exercise, and we continue to go through the data on the technology and the replacement requirements by the school. So here's a little bit of history on what actually happened, what got us to where we are here right now. In '98, we were actually Apple District, which I was surprised with. But just move your eyes down to 2004, 2016. It was a budget crunch time, and the idea was, at that time, we need to get some kind of technology into the teachers' hands. The problem was we bought off-lease equipment, and the off-lease equipment was already 3 years old. So you had computers that were not laptops, but they were dual-core processors and didn't really have the competing or the ability to compute the things that we need today. The other thing you have to understand is if it's off fleets, a normal life cycle for a computer is maximum 5 years. So you're already into your 4th year when you get those. So consider this, I'm into my 4th year. I start having a breakdown on a computer. I send a tech out. Now remember, there's what's called a loaded labor rate. So I have a cost, or we have a cost, to send a tech out to repair or to see what's wrong with the desktop for a teacher. The time the tech sits there, they take a look at it, they determine they can't fix it, they take it back to the warehouse, and we've got a little warehouse shop there that we work on things. The tech there then actually opens it up, works on it, sees what's wrong with it, the tech goes back, takes a replacement there until that one's fixed, and then that one's then repaired, and then the complete cycle is finished. So that desktop that we bought for $350 that we thought was a great deal, that was already 3 years old, ends up costing us about $725. So I could have bought that. I could have bought a new computer. But at the time, I understand the reasoning behind it, but now we're living with that legacy right now. So we got to do something about it. So, if we're going to make these giant leaps that we talked about recently in a workshop, not only do I have to rebuild the highways, which goes from the central office all the way through the network, but I have to make sure that the car put on the end of this is going to run, and it's going to run the speeds that's going to be required for Steve's digital transformation, for content that's going to come into this teacher. When she turns it on, it needs to power up and go right now. she needs to be able to take it home, or he needs to be able to take it home. And if they want to do their lesson plan for the next morning, it's ready. When they get there, it's ready to go. So what we're going to end up with at the end of this, and I'm sure you've probably heard some things about it, is our network. We've just cut over to a 2 gig wide area network with Cox. We were on a 1 gig network with CenturyLink, and it's a good thing we cut over to the 2 gig network, because through AZ Merit, we were bumping up to utilization to 1.4 and 1.5 gig. Now, the good news is we can actually turn up that volume anytime we need to, but I'll stick to what this is about. When we build the highway, we put the device on the end of it. The teacher needs to have that computing power to make that. So not only does the teacher need that, but now that we're a metrics-based district, so does the principal, so do the administrators, so that they can do the analysis that they've got to do. So you wouldn't think you'd have this many kind of devices in the classroom and what have you, and some of it may sound a bit old to you, but smart response. We still have a great deal of that. Amplifiers. Amplifiers are, let me just get this. This is one of Dr. Nance's favorite items for the teachers in the classroom. So it has amplifiers, so every child can hear properly. So that was a part of it. When the techs went to the room, these were reviewed, the projectors were reviewed. If there wasn't a tag on something, we took the serial numbers on it. So what we've got essentially is we've got a database with every room, every classroom, with every piece of technology on that, with the date that we actually acquired it. So we've got approximately 31,635 items at today's value of about 22.4 million. And of this, about 47% of it is at end of life. And when we say end of life, there's a lot of discussions about that, but if you just go back to the computer piece of it, end of life on a computer, if you have a computer that's over 4 years old, the computing power, of course, isn't what it should be. Just think about the ones you've bought that you have at home. It takes about 50% more power to operate, and a lot of times you can't operate the new applications that you need to, because it can't handle Windows 10, which is kind of a requirement today. We have about 245 Xerox network printers that are end of life, and I have to tell you, some of them are 20 years old, and we're trying to keep those pieced out to go. The majority of smart boards were purchased in 2008, and a lot of those are still working, but what's not working and what's failing are the projectors that support them. Those projectors are about $600 each, just for one projector. Now, you probably heard Dr. Birdwell mention at some point in time about what's called UPS, or uninterruptible power supplies. There was a decision made some years ago that it just wasn't that important to have these at the main distribution frames in our schools. Well, what happens, I'll use Saguaro as an example. Saguaro has the ground level for potential for lightning is higher in Saguaro than it is in any other of our schools. So if a thunderstorm comes through and it goes through there, more than likely there's going to be a strike in that area. And the problem is, if the power goes out and there's no power backup, it's going to give us 4 to 6 hours power backup for our servers, and they go down, it could take almost a full day for us to reconfigure that network. So that school is out for that day because we didn't have the power backup. And the sad thing about it is, for the whole district to have had that power backup was only about $60,000. But we've been doing without it for, I know, at least 6 years. I don't know how far back it goes other than that. So we've been very fortunate. I've already talked to you about the desktops. So in the district in total, in technology, you'll see that the majority of our district technology is in desktops and laptops that we have right now. This gives you a pictorial view of the end of life of technology by the product itself. So if you look at the desktop piece of it, almost all the desktops that we have are end of life, and it's not just what the administrators or the teachers are using. The desktops that the children are using too in the labs and what have you, they're in this same mix here. The same with the printers. The printers, we have another situation with that I really won't go into a lot with today, but there's a whole printer strategy we've got to come to terms with. I wanted to give you this.
No, but I will add to that.
Sorry?
We have printers in most classrooms, and when they wear out, they wear out. There was no plan to replace those. We bring in 3 semi-loads full of paper because everybody prints their own stuff. When we own and operate a print shop. So we will bring back a large strategy about how to deal with this, because we don't have a teacher go down to a faculty room and pick up their prints. We let them print right in their classroom, which means we have ink and supplies for every classroom, and you have no monitoring how much paper is used. So literally 3 semi-loads of paper are delivered to this district, which is an extreme amount of paper. We use a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. And if you want to know a number, it's about $143,000 a year in paper. It pains me every time I sign a purchase order for $21,000.
And that's not what the parents donate.
Yeah.
That's what we pay for. And then parents donate a whole lot more than that.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn it over to Tony here and let him give you a little bit more detail about 1718.
Hi, Mr. President, Mr. President, Dr. Birdwell, Sandra, and board members. What we did with the budget is we went ahead and collected all the software the district pays for, as IT and curriculum and transportation, building services, food services, even we tried to collect everything we need to put them together in one in this budget for next year. And the amount came at $2.3 million, $2.4 million. We have the school infrastructure. We included E-rate money for that, and that's included wireless for the high schools, cabling, and it's also voice over IP for Coronado, and it's a lot of stuff that I can go into details and in this Excel sheet.
Sorry, Tony. Governing board, is everyone familiar with what the term E-rate is? All right, maybe you want to explain to them how that works.
So E-rate is a USAC, is a federal program that the district, I believe 2 years ago and before, only the Title I schools qualified for E-rate, and it's based on free and reduced numbers we have. So the higher your numbers, the more likely you're going to get funds. And let's say if you have your high school that it's sitting at like 50% free and reduced. So whatever you order with E-rate products, like they cover anything for the class, like mainly they cover wireless. It's all has to do with communication. So wireless, cabling, they cover any the school connections to the district and then to the internet. So I believe like starting last year, the whole district now qualifies as 50%. And with that 50%, we get our internal connection. So every school, they have a connection to our data center and to the internet. So that's covered by E-rate. So we pay, I'm not sure what's the budget for that, but we pay 50% after E-rate. And we never done before where we implemented wireless or cabling, or we bought equipment for the classroom. We're gonna, in this budget, we're trying to put it in this budget to apply that E-rate and take advantage of it. Because the period that we have is 5 years, and we're in the second or third year of it. So we need to take advantage of it and use that, the 50% we can get from them. And there's a whole lot of budget you can, I'm not sure you can, if you need more details, we can provide that. So, and in this, in the school infrastructure, we include the, go back. We included the audio for classrooms. And to go to the student laptops, the way we figured the student laptops is like 10% based on the inventory we have at every school. So we're going to try to either replace all the equipment for the students or add, that'll be an addition. The classroom technology, and that's mostly, it's for Coronado. We include the budget for Coronado to change a few, we're not looking at different technologies, but like a smart board, projectors, and audio for classrooms. And the teachers that's the budget for the teacher laptops, to replace all laptops for the teachers. The details is it's quite so in this detail we it's basically gives you detailed items on what we're planning to purchase or budget for next year, and part of the plan and then is to work on our disaster recovery. Also to improve on our data center. If we're improving the schools and we're improving the network at the schools, we want to improve also the data center to make sure that we have the capacity to make sure that everything that we're putting out there is going to work. This will include all the software is listed here. That's
So Governing Board, you have this spreadsheet on your board books that breaks down all of the cost of technology that we would be looking at for next year, and it details into the categories that he has mentioned. So you had the data center, and then it went right into software next. So just so that you know, this isn't a new spreadsheet. This is one you've had.
Can I ask just a clarifying question really quick?
Sure.
So that 6.5 million after E-rate, it says annual expenditure. Is that just the depreciation rate on that, or?
Sorry, depreciation rate on?
The 6.8 million, which is the 2018 projected cost. It says annual expenditure, but is that just the depreciation on it?
No, the 6.5, the 6.5.
6.5, sorry.
Yeah, that's the number after the applied E-rate. So when if you notice on the E-rate number up here, if you take a look at school infrastructure, 2.1, and then you take the after E-rate, 1.4, you should come to 6.5.
Well, and so I'm asking, is the 6.5, so we capitalize all this stuff. So
right.
It says annual, so is this just the annual depreciation of it, or is this a capital expenditure? And we're
It's a
just calling
capital
it?
expenditure, and I'll give you a little more background. E-rate being a federal program, it's a multi-billion-dollar program. Last year there was $2 billion that weren't even applied for. We decided this year to expand that, to do what I call flood the district with Wi-Fi, so that you would have ubiquity, so that you could take your laptop, a teacher could have their laptop, or a student could be able to use their device anytime, anywhere. Looking for 100 meg to the teacher's desk is what I'm looking for. The depreciation on it, I've always had a discussion I had a discussion with Danny once, but I need to have one with Laura. That's a depreciation scale that we should amateurize, for fixed assets on this anyway. Because we haven't been keeping up with the fixed assets and doing that's another subject we need to address, and it's a very good question on the depreciation on this.
So we capitalize assets, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So maybe this is just outside, maybe, I don't know, I can ask for it outside this conversation, I guess.
Okay.
Right. Do you have a quick answer, though? I mean, is this the depreciation?
Yeah.
But we're
This
calling it
is not the depreciation schedule. This is the actual cost.
Yeah.
So, and all he's showing you is we get a rebate from E-rate and get money back. So your true cost is 6.5 million versus 7.1. Nothing is depreciated yet. So then there would be a depreciation scale as you go forward over the next 5. So that's just this expenditure here.
So that's the expense, that's the capital asset.
That's the capital, yes.
Thank you.
Great question.
So back to the budget details here. We put together more details what we put into the schools individually. And as you can see, what E-rate covers, the switching, cabling, so these items are covered by E-rate. So the money we're going to pay, the full amount, or we're going to get 50%.
So governing board, what we did was we put together a spreadsheet that actually allows you to see the funding source, the project cost, what we're contingency, the total cost, and then what we actually get it for, so that if we actually save money in the process. For instance, when we talk about computers for teachers, it is a significant investment. But we've been able to work with a vendor, and Mr. Harwell, why don't you share that with him, because we're able to get a fabulous machine for every teacher in the district for next year at such a great cost because of the amount that we're talking about.
Yeah, we negotiated with the vendor for, if you were to go to a shop to buy this computer, it would be $2,300 for each device, and we're just over $1,000 for each one, and they're i7s. And so the other thing we get with is a 5-year warranty. So you have an i7 with a 5-year warranty, and even though it has a 5-year warranty, we have a plan that in year 3, for those that continue to fail, we'll take a look at transitioning that. So the idea is to continue to transition your technology as new technology comes in, because we don't know what's going to be available in 5 years. I mean, i7s now, but there's going to be something else. And then there's going to be new digital content that we're going to need that we don't even know how we need to access it yet. But the main thing is I'll have the highway there. We'll have the devices that are going to be there, I think, good for the digital transformation that we need for content. And then so the teacher will have the tools and equipment that they need to be able to operate from the first time.
And then with the graciousness of the governing board of giving the extra professional development days for teachers, we're going to be spending some of that time on the technology so that when these new laptops get handed to teachers, they actually then go through a training of how to use those new platforms, how to also put the information into their websites that then are loaded up immediately so that parents can see who the teacher is, what the syllabus is, what they can expect the objectives for that class to be, so that we increase our communication to the parent as well. But now the teacher has the tool that they can do this with. And so then we'll have continuity and consistency from teacher to teacher and building to building, so that a parent will be able to see, this is my 3rd grade teacher, and if you're in another building, 3rd grade teacher, same objectives, same standards. So that kind of communication. But we haven't been able to do that without having consistency of technology. But because they were aged out, we asked them to put together a plan that first allowed teachers to have the tool they needed to teach, the ability to have access to the curriculum that they need. Because what happens is, if I walk in right now and turn on my computer and I have to wait for an hour, I'm not using the technology and the curriculum that I have that's online because I can't get to it. Later in the day I get it, and then I ask to download something, and then I realize it's taking too long to download. And what teachers will do, and I would too if I was a teacher, close the laptop and say I'm done for the day. And some of our schools, the teachers just quit using the laptops altogether because they had what we call spotty Wi-Fi access. So some classrooms had it, some didn't. That's all been fixed. So infrastructure and tool are coming together perfectly in July when our teachers come back with PD to support them on how to use the tools properly. So we're very excited about this piece.
So not only that, so.
Dennis says wrap it up.
No, okay. So, sorry. We have dads clubs and Charles that make huge contributions as far as laptop cards. We have to help that process because there were frustrations with these being ordered and being sent to a school and they wouldn't work because we didn't have Wi-Fi in those classrooms. So Tony sends an engineer out there, says to the principal, where are you going to use these? We actually have to implement the Wi-Fi devices at the same time. So if our strategy goes well for this summer to do this implementation for the Wi-Fi devices for the schools, then we won't have that problem next year. Yeah.
So we appreciate all the work. So back to the point here is just to say we did not move any capital item forward until we could tell you what we had, what had aged out, and to make sure that we had a good plan to move us to the future. This team has done tremendous work in this area, and they're tapping into E-rate, which is what we should be doing to get the best discount and refunds available to us, because that money's sitting there waiting for schools to access it. So any concluding points there, Mr. Hartwell?
We've saved you about $300,000 so far on negotiations. Vendors aren't used to us saying no or walking away. But now I think we're kind of building a reputation that they know we're kind of tough.
That's great. Board Member Kirby, did you have a question?
I just had one quick question, because this is a point that, I don't know, I felt like it was a little bit more of an unveiling, and we didn't really give it. But, so every teacher is going to get a new device?
Yes.
When they come to school, when they come for PD?
On August 2nd.
On August 2nd. I don't know what i7 is.
Okay, it's a processor.
Operating system?
It's an Intel, yeah, it's a processor for your operating system on a computer.
So is it like
It's
what's,
very fast. It's the fastest speed you can operate on a computer today.
HP.
Yeah.
it's an
And
HP?
the devices are HP.
And are they Windows-based or?
All Windows-based. And you can't just go with one supplier. So I have a secondary supplier of Dell. They tried to meet comp and they couldn't. If Dell had a met comp, I would have even considered them, because they have a rough duty laptop that's better for students than what some of the ones are we got right now. And we need some rough duty laptops for kids. So yeah, we're negotiating those out.
Okay,
But
great.
yeah, so they'll have the highest spec computer that they can actually get right now.
And they'll all be barcoded?
Oh, listen. Yeah, you've got the Scottsdale cops after us here. We're going to make sure everything's barcoded.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Kravitz.
I'm curious to know who will be providing the professional development for the teachers. I just want to make sure that it's implemented well, because we want to make sure that the teachers feel they're getting the information that they need and it's worth their time.
And I think I can answer that for you. So we have instructional coaches at the district level, and we're going to bring in some of those instructional leads that are selected at the school, and we're going to train them first. So there'll be a cadre of teachers at each site that have had training, and then we will roll that out site by site through those trainers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in addition to that, Microsoft is going to help us and bring trainers in too.
That'd be nice. Board Member Hartman.
All right. Thank you. Great work, and really appreciate, there's a lot of attention to detail that's behind here. Two questions. The first one was related to teachers. Anytime through this process, did you have the opportunity to ask teachers or inquire as to what they felt they needed in the classroom?
Well, two things. It's funny because Dr. Nance and Karen and Karen and the team, we've been working through that. So you build your requirements from the network back from where the teacher sets. So what are you going to be using? What kind of content are you going to be running every day? What are the speeds you need to run? So the answer to your question, that very good question, yes. We had to determine the requirements first.
Thank you. And then last week when I met with the principals and 2 teachers from every building, one of our conversations was, Dr. McCauley showed them a survey, relatively simple survey, but we said, we need you to communicate with the rest of the staff that we really want you to respond to this, because we're also asking them about every device, is it functional, non-functional, how often do they use it, and they're giving us back this information. So as we create the classrooms of the future, we also know what their expectations are, what's working, what's not. We know that in one classroom, the voice magnifying system might work, but in the next classroom, it doesn't. In the next classroom, a teacher has not just one, but has 4, because they've squirreled away 3 as a backup, because they don't want to be without. So we're asking them to help us understand what's working, what's not working, and so there's a survey going out, and they all were shaking their heads, yeah, we'll help you with that. So they're excited to be asked.
It's great, and that's what I was hoping to hear. $6 million is a significant investment, and making sure that it's utilized and well prepared for from a professional development perspective is helpful.
And remember, $2 million of that is software for the whole district.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Gas Boy, you know, I mean, it's software for the total district. Yeah.
This is probably just the beginning. And my second question is from student perspective. What's our philosophy on, student technology? Because $845,000 isn't really that much from a student perspective. So I'm just wondering, what is our vision? What's our strategy around that?
Because year one was to get the tools into the teacher's hands. Good question, Board Member Hartman. Get the technology into the teacher's hand, fix the infrastructure first, and then get it working 99.99% of the time. And then, I'm almost through.
He's going to help you with that answer.
Oh, okay.
I didn't come up here to take.
I thought you was going to hook me here.
That must be how corporate does it.
President Perleberg, board members, Mr. Hartman mentioned some work that's been going on kind of behind the scenes here. Yesterday was kind of a culminating meeting of what's been going on for a long time, where Mr. Hartwell, Dr. Benson, all the technology instructional coaches and myself met to kind of compile information they've been gathering from teachers now for some time. I mean, they've been working in the classrooms for several years for some of them. And what we put together was a draft of what we would call a standard classroom. What should be the minimum pieces of equipment in every classroom in the district? And we broke it down into a K2 classroom, a 3-5 classroom, a middle school classroom, and a high school classroom. And so we're putting that together now. And part of that was student computers, student laptops. And we talked about, well, laptop carts are what we should be talking about, but how many do you need? And so we've had that conversation as well. We've given that information to Mr. Hartwell and his team, and as they move forward over the next few years, as we phase this in, the goal is to bring every classroom in the district up to the standard. Now, that doesn't mean we won't go above and beyond, but we want to get everybody to that standard at all of our schools to start with. So that's an ongoing project. That work is underway, and certainly professional development comes on top of that.
Any other questions?
Absolutely. All right. Any further questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
Pages of the spreadsheet?
Probably more than you ever wanted to see.
There's a, maybe I'm, okay, can I jump in?
Yes.
Are you
Board Member
presenting,
Cooey.
maybe you're presenting.
We're going into the bond section next. This was capital.
Okay, I'll wait. I think we're going to take this.
So Mr. Rail, our Director of Maintenance and Operations, is here, and he is going to talk about life cycle. So let me set this up a little bit. In January 17th, we, Mr. O'Brien and myself did a presentation with the governing board on, here are the first projects. We gave you a spreadsheet, so these were the pieces we would look at. We discussed things like marquees, and it was kind of general consensus that marquees really weren't the most important thing we should be doing, and you couldn't be more spot on. Not that we don't think they're important, and I think the parents and the PTOs would appreciate it, but in reality, as we began to look at these life cycles, and remember a conversation we had about, hey, if you can, could you get a focus on life cycles? Well, we did. We took your advice, went back, and we put a heavy focus on, we know we have some big projects. We know we have the Hopi project, we have the football fields, we have the track, we have a couple others, HOCOM and PIMA. These are huge projects. And we've tasked ourselves to the extent of our stretch. So we knew that front office remodels under security were not on this summer's slate, but we could really jump into some life cycles and help get the buildings going forward from that FMG report and from the maintenance and operations department in the field saying, I've had a work order hanging out there since 2014. And how do we catch up some of those pieces? So we challenged Mr. Rayler with, what can you get done this summer and begin to move us forward? We're not going to spend this 3.5 on front office remodels at this time, but what could you do with that dollar to address life cycles? And he's going to report on that now.
Well, now that you've stole my thunder, President Perleberg, members of the board, Dr. Birdwell, my name's Dennis Rayler. I haven't been in front of you before. I've been in the district now working on 10 months. I've been in schools since 1995 and at the director's level since 2003. So I bring plenty of experience, and I hope that what you see tonight is something that you can get excited about, because our team over at Building Services certainly is. Since we're the ones that get to work on this stuff that's failing, because we have a lot of failing components in our schools, we're real excited to get started on these projects. So I'm going to start with the safety and security projects. If you remember, Mr. O'Brien brought to you the list of projects, all of the rebuilds, and as Dr. Birdwell said, there were the other ones, the other projects. And so as I was refining this just last night, one of the things that was real important to everybody was cameras. Another thing is the door hardware security. And so as it worked out, I was able to put together this safety and security package aside from front office remodels that helps get us going on the safety and security, and do $3.5 million worth of life cycle work in everything that you've already approved as of January. Okay, so what you're going to see in this particular spreadsheet, a lot of sameness, so I'm not going to go through it all, but basically every school that is not on the rebuild is going to see some work in cameras, hardware, and a push button for emergency lockdowns. So we'll be in a situation where if we have a lockdown situation, they'll be able to push a button, it will connect to our intercom, and our intercom will make the announcement automatically. So if there's chaos in the front office or whatever the case may be, they don't have to go and try and push the buttons and make the announcement. So we're working on all of those things, and we expect to have those in all of the schools. Now, in thinking through this very long board meeting, we certainly don't want to, we have schools that are going to be rebuilt, but they're not going to be rebuilt tomorrow. And so I know that we'll be able to find some savings along the way. And if we put, let's say for instance, we put door hardware in Kiva because it's important, we can also pull that out 18 months, 24 months, 32 months from now, and then reinstall it in the new building. And so we will look at that and come back again to say, hey, you know, we're not going to forget the rebuild schools either. We're not going to leave it so while the rebuild schools are getting rebuilt, but it's not important to us. That we definitely don't want that message to be out there. So we will make sure that we'll look at everything real closely and make sure that everyone's getting their attention, okay? So this first worksheet is really the classroom hardware, the emergency lockdown solution, and cameras throughout the district, okay? And that spend, and you'll see that you're probably wondering the colors. The colors represent the learning communities. We kept them all together, so anybody that looks at this spreadsheet can kind of see how they're lumped together. And then we've got our contingency or design in there, and then the total for the project. So we're looking at a total spend of $854,090 for this safety and security piece. We've been talking with contractors already, talking with suppliers, trying to figure out where they're at, what our lead time is on some of these products, and we are really confident that we can knock out all of this work this summer and get it taken care of, okay? Any questions on that safety and security piece?
Oh, sorry, Board Member Kirby.
Thank
I was
you.
looking
So
at myself.
you'll have to refresh my memory. What was in the original plan, budget
I've got that up here, Dr. Birdwell.
for this piece? So how are we coming in?
So originally, there was a school safety list, and it said upgrading and installation on cameras at campuses, all schools except rebuilds. That was $151,500.
Okay.
And then there was another item, school site safety, upgrading of door hardware for security purposes. That had a line item of $660,000. Okay? So that is, let me find my math here.
It's 42,500. So this budget would be 42,590 over.
Right. But on my life cycle, I'm saving money so that we're still under, because ultimately, you approved $4,381,500, and what I'm proposing is $4,345,847.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you.
Board Member Beckham.
Thank you, this makes a lot of sense. So the only question I have is, if Building Services is doing this, why would we have a design fee? I mean, for cameras and hardware for security?
We have it in there just in case. It's really just a placeholder. My expectation is, and that's why I said I expect to see savings. So you'll see in my next spreadsheet and my next spreadsheet that I just have that column in there as a placeholder, but my expectation is that we'll be able to come back at some point and say, we didn't have to have design fees, we didn't have to do this, we didn't spend contingency, and here's the savings. And you can see in this column I, which if I did the math, if I put a number in here, that's going to show me what I have left in that budget. So if I then take this out, so it will help me manage that money and know that I've got savings, and is there other projects, can we revisit things and come back to the board and say, because I would like to come back to the board on a regular basis, show you the spreadsheet, and say, look what we've done. This is what we've accomplished. We've done well in these areas, not so well in these areas, because sometimes we just can't predict some of the things, asbestos abatements and things like that. So we left that in there. We could certainly take it out, but then that gives us even a bigger savings than what you're seeing right now, the difference between the two.
Personally, I would like to see it taken out if we're not using it, just so we have transparency. And if you need those additional funds, I would just maybe increase your contingency line so that we know it's truly a contingency line.
We can do that.
And not, I mean, that's just personal.
And it's just, it is, because we can clean that up for the projects that we know that we're not going to need design and maybe increase the contingency. But you'll see on this next spreadsheet where there are projects that will require design. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have your light, but you're done? Okay, nope, go ahead.
Okay. So as Dr. Birdwell mentioned, our team, when we got tasked with this, our team went through every outstanding work order that was dubbed capital. There were 192 of them. Remember, I've only been here for 10 months. some of them dating back to 2014. So we've washed those things, we've talked to the campuses, and it turned out that a lot of them had been done, but had been done through the campuses, the PTOs, the booster clubs, various entities other than the district. So we washed all those out, got that all taken care of, and then we started looking at the FM group work that they had done and the work that Terry Wooster had done. So we looked at things like, can we get this project done? Can we really get this project done? What kind of design do we need for some of these things? Some of it's a pretty quick deal, and we talked to the Dunn Edwards, and they put together a spec for us for painting. They could usually get it to us within a couple of weeks. It really doesn't cost us anything. Or maybe it's one of these erosion projects that we need a civil engineer to come in and help us understand why water flows the way it does, where it's flowing, and how we're going to manage that flow. So a number of these projects will require design, others won't. But I can certainly make that adjustment on the ones that I know are not going to need it, and we can clean that up. Not a problem at all. Okay? So let's see how big that is. So our focus on the life cycle work was health and safety. Do the roofs leak? Does the building leak? Because some of our paint jobs are so old and so threadbare that they don't hold water out. If we have a storm that comes from the west or from the south and it's driving rain, it just rains right through the building. So carpet, if you go to some of our schools, carpeting, especially in August when it's nice and moist, the carpet cleaners have come through, it looks like you're at Big Surf. Some of the carpets are just horrible. So we looked at a lot of those things. We looked at outside of our buildings because the kids play out there just as much as they learn inside. And the scraped knees and the trips and falls and all of that, we need to resolve that too. And then anything that we have outside, and really anything that we have in our buildings on our campuses, if it's in disrepair, then it takes more time away from just keeping the buildings up. Our maintenance guys spend more time. When we had a storm at Redfield, pushed water like all the way down the street, the city of Scottsdale was so mad at us because there must have been 12, 14 tons of dirt in the middle of the street. So we've got to resolve those erosion issues. We've got to resolve some of the things that are happening at our campuses. So this is year 16, 17. I'm not going to talk about 17, 18, and 18, 19 yet. We have started working on that, and ultimately we would like to have for you a plan. So we know what we're doing going forward, so you can talk to your constituents going forward. And of course, the plan will always change. There will always be something that, all of a sudden this takes precedence over that. But at least you'll be able to talk intelligently about what we're doing going forward, okay? So flooring replacement, stormwater erosion, basketball courts. So if you've ever been to Cochise, the basketball courts, just bizarre. It was asphalt, and they saw cut it to repair it, and the saw cut areas have sunk down, so there's trip hazards. It's in really bad shape. Some of our irrigation systems are in bad shape. They've been there for a long time. You'll see Cochise actually gets quite a bit of attention in year one. Rooftop units, Cochise had all brand new air conditioning done not that long ago, but the kitchen and cafeteria didn't get done. So those units need to be done sooner rather than later. So you'll see a lot of the same things. Bell and intercom system, I believe we have 4 of them on here. Copper Ridge is a computer-based bell and intercom system that a computer, imagine running all of the time instead of being turned off and turned on. There are other devices that work much better as intercoms. They're something that's built more sturdily than a computer. So, let's see, any other, we got flooring, paint, roofs, and roofs, I think we only put one roof in here because there is some planning with the roof. And so we're looking at roofs for next year. Paint always, people just marvel when they come to the school, they show up for the first day of school and the building's painted and it looks fantastic. So that's the list. I will certainly make adjustments to the architectural piece for you, but we are proposing that we spend just less than was originally asked for back in January. Okay? Any questions?
Board Member Kirby.
Thank you for your, this is great work. It's the detail.
Thank you.
And I understand it's fluid, but you got to know where you're going. You got to lay out the path, and you can adjust year to year, month to month. But this is good stuff. So thank you for all your efforts. The question that I was going to ask before you came up, I guess, is a Mr. Hartwell question, because it's on a couple of slides that talk about fixed assets and visions. So it's the disposal. It was a couple slides in here that talked about how we dispose of our some of our technology, I guess.
Yep.
The question I have is, are we still doing the TechLink initiative?
No, in fact, thank you for that question, Board Member Kirby. In fact, there was a website that was up that I had taken down. And the reason was it was requesting anybody to bring any of their technology to the school, anything that was dated, whatever, we would take it. Well, it cost us more to take that technology and to try to make it work than it's worth actually to work with. And the other problem is, if we have some insistent PTOs, and they definitely want to give us 10 laptops, provided they're usable, I'll take them, but when they die, they're dead. They're gone.
Okay.
We won't repair them.
So in the slides talked about fixed asset disposal. I think it said we need a new process, or we need to talk about we'll explain new process for disposals.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading right here, part of TechLink was disposing district property.
Can I explain? Good question. Let me tell you how that happened. Okay. When I first came in, actually, when I did a little bit of consulting forensics work for the district in June of last year, I quickly found out that these auction houses were able to go directly to a school, pick up pallets of technology that hadn't been wiped. They were picking up pallets of books that may have gone back to the warehouse. So there wasn't a central distribution. So I actually stopped that. I stopped that straight away. Just like I stopped the purchase orders that were for off-lease equipment. I stopped that. So right now you have to have a single point of distribution. You have to have a single point that outdated assets comes to for determination. And we do the physical determination at the warehouse. And because I have Visions and I have Destiny too, which is Destiny is educational material plus everything below $1,000. Visions is everything above $1,000, and that's more for the state. Both sides, and I've actually cross-trained both those groups so they know how to work each other's systems. Nothing comes into the warehouse that I don't do a final determination on before it goes out that door. There's a company that I used to work with that's actually certified DoD defense for killing laptops, killing the hard drives. They did work for Luke Air Force Base. They do work for the state. We still had that contract, but nobody used it. Well, I reinitiated it. It's only good for another 3 months, but I'm going to use it again. And they give us money on the pound for these things, but they have to give me a certification that these are dead computers. Because right now, that wasn't the case before when they were being picked up before. So yes, processes have been put in place. There's a single point of distribution and a single point of determination before we sign those off.
Okay, great.
So that's in place now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Hartman.
Thank you, and thank you for the good work, Mr. Rayler. And I'm going to ask this on behalf of Board Member Kravitz and I. On the safety list, I'm surprised we didn't see filling in gopher holes in Cherokee, but anyways, maybe that's just a small item.
That's actually an M&O item, so if you get your school secretary to put a work order in, we'll take care of it.
All right, well,
A new student PE activity, and it's a stomp activity.
it's a whack-a-mole over there.
Give them all a bunch of golf clubs and see how they do.
Exactly. I had a question because we had a number of emails that came through recently, and it just raises the question because we're talking about these type of expenditures. Do we have contingency plans for things like lead, or how we have that potentially lead assessment? How does that all fit in here?
Wow, that has taken up a lot of my time lately. It is not nearly as bad as people think. I will entertain anyone that wants to talk about it for whatever amount of time. The lead is in the schools that have been shown to be positive. It's more likely than not coming from that fixture. It's not coming from the city water. It's not likely coming from our own plumbing system. It's likely coming from the fixture. So ADEQ has established a secondary protocol for sampling. We're working with the city of Scottsdale and the city of Phoenix to get them back out and do the secondary protocol. That protocol is basically isolate the building now. We know that we have one sink in the Desert Mountain concession stand. Well, they'll go back now and test any other fixtures that are in that particular building. And then what should happen is you get a whole bunch more negative results and one positive on the sink that was initially identified. And then at that point, the school facilities board is collaborating with the districts to deal with those. Now, in our case, it's one sink here, one drinking fountain there. It's really not too bad. So we're gonna see how that goes. And right now, we've got them all isolated, so we know that everyone can be rest assured that their kids are safe. And then we'll look at whether we're going to go to the SFB, because sometimes they can take months to make a decision, versus just going out and spending $10,000 doing whatever we need to do. So I've been very happy with the results so far. I've heard of school districts and schools that have it in every single drinking fountain in their school. So, and most of ours have not been drinking fountains, they've been sinks. So you don't typically drink out of the sink, but there's a chance. So they test those too. So rest assured that it's really not as big of a problem as some might think.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you making that a priority as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Anyone else? Okay.
I just want to say thank you. I want the board to understand the work that has gone on with Mr. Reller, which I had the privilege to work with many, many moons ago back in Paradise Valley, and I was impressed then and continue to be impressed with his work. He brought us his spreadsheet, gave us the great ideas how to track things properly. He is just spot on, and I have all the faith in the world that he will keep us updated and he will see through on those projects. And to Mr. Hartwell and his team, they have been doing an immense amount of work to get to this point so that we would have the confidence that we were not duplicating purchases and putting money where it shouldn't go. So I can't thank him enough. And just by the way, within 5 minutes, Casey said 50% Mountainside, Desert Canyon Middle School is 34%, and Cheyenne is at 14%. So, and he has a 3-year trend data on that already.
All right, yes, thank you for the presentation and helping us with this tool that you've created, kind of wrap our arms around, such a big project. So yeah, I have no doubt you guys have been working really hard this past year, so thank you very much. All right, future, on to item 11, future items. Board members may propose topics for future consideration.
that are not already on, on our agenda? If none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Good night, everyone.
Thank you guys for such a long day. We so appreciate it. We had a lot of work.